Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Hello! It is another week down in 2021 Season 1, or as we all know it now affectionately, Season 1, 2021, 2022. Some words to that effect. There's
Interesting aside, I actually saw a tournament run by the Australians. They call it 2.1.
2.1,
which
there we
actually
go.
makes a lot of sense.
So we're in 2.1. There we go. And I am Mickey, as always, joined by this man over here, Carlo, as per usual. How was your week, Carlo?
I had quite a Song of Ice and Fire week. Didn't play on Friday. Also didn't really look at anything, do anything until today when I came and had a look at the tournaments over the weekend, which is a good thing to happen now and again because I can sometimes get a bit too close to a Song of Ice and Fire, spend too much of my time obsessing over it. So yeah, I feel a bit reinvigorated by having not thought about Song for a whole week.
Yeah, having a bit of a break from it, which is in some ways a good thing. More on that later. And of course, joined also by this man up here, a face that many people here would recognise. And if you're listening to the podcast, of course, we do have a podcast available on basically every podcast channel that exists. And if it doesn't exist on one that you want it to be on, tell me and I'll put it on there. It is Teemu, yet again, from
Hi
Finland.
guys.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. A bit exhausted after the tournament this weekend, but happy.
Good. That's what matters, is that you're happy. And that's what we like the most. People being happy is the nicest thing that we can possibly ever have. Except Carlo. Carlo being happy is only possible when everyone else is sad. So what we actually want
exactly.
is...
I am driven by misery, so yeah, I mean, it's best when I'm miserable because...
I'm not gonna go political or anything, but I think it's good to feel happy as we have this pretty nasty eastern neighbor from Finland and who's not behaving very nicely. So
I've heard about that.
I really looked for an opportunity to put my mind to Song of Ice and Fire instead of real life. What's happening?
Yeah. So when real life is miserable, I think what Teemu's saying is play a Song of Ice and Fire, and that will make you feel better.
Check.
Unless you
Roger
lose.
that. Roger that.
No. No, it's great. All right, a few things to talk about today, and the first thing to talk about is the only real news that has happened over the last week in terms of anything related to the game. More on stats and stuff as we go into it, but the actual only news this week is that Warcouncil has now properly been updated. Properly. I use that term with air quotes. Properly. A couple of things. Firstly, they have completely and utterly changed Warcouncil and the way Warcouncil works. Did anybody know that? Because that's a thing. That will mean that myself and Carlo will be doing... we'll be having a discussion about how we're going to do assets and things in the future for the site and stuff, because it's definitely possible. But basically, it just makes my job a little bit more miserable. It doesn't make it harder. It doesn't make it impossible. It just
AKA it makes Carlo more happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Teemu knows.
I'm learning. I'm learning.
Yeah.
But it is for this exact reason that we were able to get to the bottom of some problems that Warcouncil's seen. There will still be no updated bears and no drowned men. As far as Warcouncil is concerned, they are not released still. That is a whole different question. I don't quite understand why we live in a world where those things they've seen. I mean, certainly the bears, less so drowned men, but the bears have literally seen US release now.
Mm-hmm.
And US release was always what we went by when it came to Warcouncil updates.
Yeah.
So, what are we waiting on? I don't know. And people will use them, but you literally can't build them in the app. And if we can't build them in the app, then we're hesitant to put them on stats. It's very weird. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, that is a new. This is a new region, or like new problem, in my opinion. You know, like I've been relatively closely monitoring over the time, like what Warcouncil does and what it means. There are obviously always been times ever since people started getting miniatures imported relatively early. There have always been people with miniatures and them not being Warcouncil. That's been very common for a long time. But they've always been on Warcouncil by the time that CMON acknowledged their existence. CMON put out, posts saying this is released. And by the time they meet US official release dates, they've always been on the app. So we're in totally new uncharted territory about why this is happening. I mean, honestly, it's news to me that the app has changed as of like 20 minutes ago when Mickey decided to tell me. Maybe they're having problems. Like maybe they decided to change the app presumably on purpose. Presumably it wasn't a total accident. They decided to change the app, and actually they're having problems because one of the other things that is in the app is there are lots of mistakes, or what we can only assume are mistakes.
So
what I'm guessing are mistakes.
Not mistakes, and that's it. And that's why I thought I'd download it. We were going to talk about mistakes today, and this is when I realised that they aren't mistakes. Okay? They are not mistakes because mistakes implies that they're incorrect in relation to how the site is, or the app is built. And they are not incorrect in relation to the way the app is built. Right? The app now, when it looks at cards, it no longer gives you full card art. The app now builds the card art for you in the app. It provides all the components and it puts it together. Now the problem is, and Carlo knows exactly where I'm going with this. If you have
a rule, and finds a rule like Courtney's rule, which says that you can march, but it finds the wrong rule because it exists on a different card.
Yes, so valuable captive, for example, if I was trying to desperately find it, will exist in the rules section of their construction. And valuable captive, obviously we'll know it as Rickon. Rickon, the most often used version, says this unit gains +1 to morale tests when Jamie is destroyed. Your opponent gains 1 victory point. Now the problem, that's the text for the rule, but Rickon, which Jamie has, by the way, Jamie has valuable captive, but Rickon also has the rule valuable captive. So by using a proper noun in the ruling of the rule, you then reference that model and only that model. So that is why there's been errors, right? Is it actually an intended error, or is it an error that they could have foreseen? Well, the app developers would never have actually considered that being an issue. But it is obviously an issue from the way the rules are.
Maybe they'll have to fix their loose wording. They'll have to realize that they've got the same rule in multiple places that does different things.
Yes, they will. They will actually have to do that.
Does it put together tactics cards or tactics cards in images?
As far as I'm aware,
that's a very interesting thing because obviously tactics cards have been one of the biggest things where like there are multiple references to what is effectively the same rule, but they're written differently in each location.
Tactics cards are put together.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
watch this space.
This actually is very, very, very good news because tactics cards texts in Warcouncil can now be changed without any additional art required. It takes all of about 3 seconds for me to go in to Warcouncil and change the text to something that I would need to do. As far as I'm aware, I can do that anyway. I'm looking at it now, and actually the tactics cards don't seem to have a text for the actual ability itself. Oh no, they do. Oh my god, it's horrible. For those of you who don't know Excel, the whole wording of the text, so the trigger isn't an independent piece of text. The trigger is part of the text of the whole card. So yeah, but the whole thing is in Excel spreadsheets.
Very interesting change.
Yes.
Well, there you go. That is why your cards in Warcouncil are wrong.
Yep. Because they're not actually wrong. They're right.
Well.
It's just the rules are written badly. You could argue. So that is a good thing. I mean, it is a good thing because it does mean things like valuable captive will have to avoid using proper nouns if they want to be ubiquitous abilities that are used on multiple areas. Is this a problem as well? Yes. The reason this is a bit of an issue is it does mean that if you use a proper noun in terms of a card's text with the ability that it has, it does mean that you'd either have to create another ability with different wording, which, if anyone remembers pre 1.6, the old Sikkim rule from Bottom Bastard Girls, Bottom Bastard Girls had Sikkim, which was charging volley. It was exactly the same rule, but it was the Bolton Bastard Girls variant, and one of the decisions they made was to clean that up, to call it charging volley, and then it becomes ubiquitous with all the other things that are charging volley. Except they now have kind of like retconned that a little bit by saying, well, we can't use abilities that reference these things because they suddenly become problems in the app. It's good news in some ways because it's good news for people in terms of like the ease of this stuff changing on Warcouncil is actually very quick and easy to change. Like, I'm no expert, right? I'm literally not an expert with this stuff, but I could go into Warcouncil now if I had if they gave me the dev files, I could go in and I could change literally whatever I wanted in seconds. That doesn't require a developer. That's the most interesting thing. Because it might mean that changes can be made from Simon's end and not the independent app builder's end, which would be interesting. I doubt it'll ever go that way. But in theory, it would allow them to change it.
I still have no clue about like who makes and maintains Warcouncil. Like, no idea.
No. But yeah, the bad news is, like, we won't go into too much detail. The bad news is it will make building cards for stats. It will make building any assets much harder, unless of course you get provided them by Simon free of charge. But it won't stop it. Like, it legitimately won't stop people putting the assets together. And honestly, once you develop a system to do it, it will take seconds. Like, it will just mean if I was going to do it for Carlo, we'll either come up with a new system or we'll just create a system that builds them for us because that's what they have anyway. We'll just code something that builds it for us. There you go, done. So that is people could use that to create their own cards and so on. Yes, they could actually. That is the other thing, is that now the graphics, it does actually mean, because they give you the independent parts, which they always did, by the way. Anyone who didn't know that, they always provided those individual assets anyway. Because they have to. With Android apps, you have to make it all accessible. You could have made your own cards using their assets anyway. You can do it even more easily now. It is actually a lot easier. So that is a positive side for those creators who want to create stuff for the community, which I think is a good thing. That is a good thing.
But the game modes didn't update.
But the game modes didn't update. The FAQ didn't even update.
The FAQ didn't update. So we are in a bit of a weird situation where effectively lots of the cards, they seem to have rules that differ from the most recent update, right? Like literally 2-3 weeks ago, whatever it was. Rules are different.
This is actually the problem as well. If you move to a spreadsheet style system, which is what they have, you've got a very good chance of making typos. So, there is errors. And there are errors that I'm not going to go through all of them, but a classic example is I will show you on the website.
But they're also stat based
yes
errors, right?
yes
Like,
stat based
because
errors,
presumably it also doesn't have art for a unit's cards, right? It puts together everything from say the longsword ability is put together
yes
by the app,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Which is a problem because Queen's Men, as we see from the card, this is the card pool from Season 1 sheets that we saw. If I find Queen's Men in the data files, R'hllor Queen's Men have a 754 profile on the app. They have a 764 profile in the card. This is an issue, right? It's different if you've got the name of a word, like the name of a proper noun in the name of an ability, is a genuine kind of like, I can see why that mistake has been made. And if we understand that, we can communicate and say, actually, that should just say Rickon, or actually, that should just say Jamie, or Preston, or whoever. That's an easy thing to like work out, because a proper noun is just a proper noun switch. Stat profiles that are wrong, we can't fix that. Is 764 right, or is 754 right? So, unfortunately, guys, that does mean that Queen's Men are now unplayable in a competitive scenario. No.
They only just became playable 2 weeks ago. That's not fair.
So that's interesting. Is there another unit with longsword? There might be a unit with longsword 754, but the way they structure their abilities, I don't think they structure it in that sense. To answer your question, if you're thinking, is that an ability? Well, no, its attack profiles are built based on a different spreadsheet. Trust me, I've got like 8 spreadsheets open here with different files and things that they use in Warcouncil. Yeah. Be with that what they made. They've streamlined it, they've made it good. It does mean there's going to be an issue. So yeah. Don't really know what to say after that.
I mean, code-wise, it's a lot better system.
Oh, gotcha.
Tell you that. They don't have to upload the cards for every single, like, they don't have to upload every single card anymore, right? You just upload a few assets and you say, oh, and here's a spreadsheet of how you make it into a card.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do that. That makes life a lot easier. It makes it easier for the development side, definitely. But yeah. 754, yeah. Don't think of these abilities that you see on other units with the name longsword, because it's an attack profile. It's not actually an ability that we see on the right hand side with text. They are built differently in the app.
But all these people saying that longsword is 754 makes me wonder if maybe Queen's Men longsword is supposed to be 754.
But that's exactly it. The problem, isn't it? Is that
actually, I really don't know. Like, I am actually questioning it now. I'm actually questioning whether or not the error is in the file that they gave us.
Except it can't be. Do you know why?
Because the printed card says that?
No. Watch Marshall has a longsword, which is 3.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying because longsword must be that value, but like
it does question. The thing is, it just raised questions. It doesn't have any answers.
You know, like one of these things is not like the others. One of these things might be wrong.
Exciting times.
Yeah, yeah. What an unknown world we move into. What a wonderful period of discovery.
I know, right? Yeah, it certainly is. I'm gonna actually have a little look at
For now, I am ignoring Warcouncil myself. I believe that Warcouncil, which is a huge change, because I've always considered Warcouncil to be the
go-to
official rules. Like if it's in Warcouncil, there is no discussion about it. it's the right rules. But Warcouncil has such obvious errors right now in the written descriptions that then I can't trust that errors or differences in stat-based profiles are correct, because I'm like looking at it and I'm like, but this other card is wrong. So why would I believe that these changes here that I see are different?
Anybody who cares, by the way, if you really want to see how silly this gets, load up. So just as a quick example here, load up Lannister Guardsmen, look at Lannister Guardsmen, and then the new ones on the new app, and then look up like Stormcrow Mercenaries. Both have the longsword ability. The new Lannister, this is the old one we see in 2021. The new Lannister Guardsmen have long swords, and Stormcrow Mercenary have long swords. It's literally not the same name. One of them's got a space and a capital S. One of them doesn't. Anyway, there you go. That's the kind of stuff that we do on a weekday. Look up Excel files for differences. It's like bloody work.
That's what Mickey does. Don't tarnish me with that brush. I don't do. I'm not that weird.
No. You moved on from looking for errors in Excel files. You learned how to code instead. Anyway, that's a piece of news that everyone I thought needed to know and at least be aware of, because it is a big issue that Warcouncil isn't right. That doesn't mean that Warcouncil's wrong. That's the funny thing. It's just that it's not right for what the information we know. Teemu.
Yes.
Warcouncil for you. I know you use it quite a lot. Certainly for like when you're out and about and like looking up opponents' lists and doing searches and things like that for like quick information sometimes. Some people use stats, some people use other builders, some people use Warcouncil. How do you feel about Warcouncil being not right?
We had quite a bit of a discussion with the people participating in this tournament about whether one should have physical cards on the table or a printed army list from the Warcouncil, for example, to be able to communicate or very clearly without, fumbling around with your mobile phone. And we agreed after the discussion that everybody should have physical print cards, printouts of the army list, especially because we had quite a few quite new players. And of course, it's also good that it's faster with the physical copy. And now with games are taking longer, so you don't want to waste time at all. But of course, if you can't even now trust the printed output of your army, it certainly is an issue. And of course, many players are confused about the rules changing and units being updated. So confusion reigns, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's a very interesting one, and yeah, I think newer players are going to struggle. Or one of the things that me and Carlo hate.
You say that, but like newer players
won't
know that it's wrong.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually
right.
true.
Like they'll just play what it says.
Yes.
Right.
But if it's a new player playing against an older player, and you're like, hang on, the older player goes, that's not right. That kind of sucks. The reason that me and Carlo, I think the big thing for me and Carlo on this front, I do speak for Carlo in some ways here, is that misinformation is the one thing that me and Carlo hate. Like the whole point of Tourney Ground is to try and provide people with the right information where we can. And yes, sometimes we don't make. Yes, every now and then we make a mistake, right? But actually providing people with what is correct and how things should be done in regards to not rules, but like the game, the news, what's happening, that we try and keep as unbiased as we can, but also, truthful. And this makes it hard.
I think that it's super important for any competitive community that everybody's playing from the same playbook. Like I've always said that, like, whatever it is, I'd rather I've talked about this extensively when it comes to like community balance, right? Like that's a big thing that people always wanted. Like when there's long periods of no changes, when people talk about imbalance in the game and stuff like that. I would rather we played a less balanced version of the game, and we were all on the same page, right? Like everybody knew what was official, everybody knew what was correct, everybody knew what the rules were, rather than we got to improve the game, but some people play the community balance, some people play the real game, some people play the official one, some people play some variant. Everybody, different group, has its own house rules. That's like that's a death sentence for any kind of competitive community. Competitive community, however good the game is, needs to play from the same playbook. It needs to play from the same rules. Everybody needs to be on the same page so that you can turn up to an event and it's like every other event that you've played at. Yeah, there may be variants, but the point is that it's very specifically like stated, like this is our variant. When we will play these modes, or we will play with random terrain. We won't play with random terrain. Even things as simple as that, like that the rulebook states that there isn't a standard on terrain, is already like enough that it annoys me. I don't mind which way it goes. I don't care which one's better. I don't care which one's worse. I would rather there was a standardization. And I already find it difficult that there are different groups, particularly around the UK. Some of them prefer random terrain. Some of them prefer none. Almost not. They all assume that theirs is normal. And so when they run a tournament, they never think it worthwhile stating which one it is, even though I personally believe it can have quite a big impact upon the game. And then one of the first questions you always find people asking about a tournament is, oh, by the way, is this random terrain? Or is this selected terrain? And so that's even just the tiniest little ruling. When you blow that out into terms of like whole rebalances, whole rule changes for certain commanders, certain factions, certain things like that, then you understand how it can become an absolute nightmare for anybody to try and play in an event with people that they've never played before. And that just means that we can't kind of we can't have a competitive community that is like actually engaged with each other. We end up with like isolated pockets of people playing different games. So I've always said, worse game with more standardization is my preferred route, and it's a really big problem if we lose what was our one almost perfect benchmark of standardization, which is you can rely on Warcouncil, even if it's slow, to be right.
Did you guys say that the actual, because I am running the test flight version on my iPhone, which has these errors as you're saying, but that is test flight, so they are expecting us now to give them feedback. But is it really the official app? Is that also containing these same errors?
As far as I'm aware, the official app. So the problem is I don't know the iOS system. Right, I'm going to straight up say that.
I can't see the update.
Yeah.
Of the official app, so it's only in the test flight mode. So it's a beta version.
Yeah, the actual problem is that I don't know how they manage the test flight and beta versions of the game, because I believe that the beta version is the one that I'm using, but most people will be using test flight or beta because of the changes that they made. What's interesting is I don't think this is a beta.
Right.
I think this is the full release. As far as I'm aware.
See. Coming to these house rules, I think that's the longest debate ongoing in our community as well. And I've always wanted to shy away from those things, and I kind of trust Simon to fix these things. A couple of things come to my mind. Red Cloak's release and the charge being two different actions, pretty obviously. And everybody in our community was no way charge is two actions, because it's too nuts. And I think we played it as one action, and very soon we saw that they fixed it in the next FAQ. And the last time I was talking with you guys, and we were going nuts about this NCU situation not being able to pass, and they fixed it quite rapidly, which is good.
Teemu, I think
So
you'll
I
find.
kind of rather just.
I think you'll find.
If it's not that blatant, then we'll just no house rules, and if there's a problem, they will fix it. That's my viewpoint.
I think you find they didn't fix the NCU problem because people mentioned it. I think you find that they already noticed that problem, and it was just an old document that was uploaded.
Yeah.
Do you believe that story?
Well, problems.
I think that the Red Cloaks is a really interesting one. So that is where my view becomes quite a hard line, which other people disagree with. Right, that's where my view gets taken to the extreme, which is, as far as I was concerned, the rules as written were that it was 2 actions. We had people who had close connections to Simon all telling us, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. Right, but my hardline view is the community must play what the rules say. And my view was that up until the day where they changed it to be 1 action, where they changed the actual rules, it wasn't an FAQ, it was an errata of the rules to change the way the rules work. Up until that day, I played Red Cloaks as 2 actions, and I would always have ruled Red Cloaks charging as 2 actions. I was happy when they made it 1. It wasn't that I believed that they should be 2. It wasn't that I believed that was the better variant of the game or anything like that. But that was what the rules said. And in my mind, the community must play what the rules say, unless there's a particular FAQ.
In the end of the day, that is better.
Yeah. And it's actually better for us, because in the end of the day, they said, this is a problem. It's causing confusion. It's being played incorrectly because that's what people think it says. So we have to correct it. The game was actually made better because of that ruling. And I don't mean from balance. I mean the overall game as a structure was then better simply because they made that ruling, and it made the whole thing make sense.
Cold Hand's not giving a -1 on a charge anymore. Disagrees. Cold Hands didn't feel like he got better in that update.
No, but what I mean to say is the interactions it made sense with the way that the rules were written.
Sort of, but what I'm saying is I've actually watched a lot of players be confused by the fact that Cold Hands, so this is kind of the knock-on effect, the ramification, which is maybe not even that widely known. Cold Hands can only use his order of Raven's Flock against a melee attack, and a charge
or an attack action
because of that ruling is not a melee attack. Very specifically, it is a charge action.
Sorry,
I think, and his wording is when it performs an attack action, but you don't perform an attack action during a charge anymore. You perform a charge action, which results in a melee attack. Very specifics of the wording. Again, it could even be an unintended consequence that they didn't realize. But the point is that is the way the game works now. And again, as I say, whether it's an intended consequence or not, as the rules are written, my hardline view is, well, he can't use it on charges.
It doesn't say melee action. It just says any attack action.
Yeah, but a charge isn't an attack. Which is...
It works against ranged attack too. It
does work against ranged.
Yes. So. Yes, but it works on everything but a charge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which does feel silly. I'm not going to lie. Yeah.
But that's the way it goes.
Rules as written. That's
rules as written.
I understand it. I understand it though. It makes complete sense. When you're running to a charge, the ravens come down, but they can't. You're faster than the ravens, so you outrun them. That's what it is. Yeah, I get it now.
Okay. That's what you tell your children as a bedtime story.
The ravens are slow. Oh dear.
That's a good one.
Anyway.
Shall we move on?
We should move on. We should move on. We shall move on, and we'll move on to a little bit of news that I want to talk about before we get to Teemu's event. We'll come on to Teemu's event in a very short period of time, though. Adepticon, as far as I'm aware, registration is now closed, right? It closed at the end of February. Last Monday was the last day you could buy tickets. As far as I'm aware, you can't register for the event now. There's a waiting list you can register for. I don't know if that means they're likely to use it. So we know Adepticon numbers. Adepticon numbers are as follows. We've got, zoom in for you guys on screen as well, 10 people for the Fist of the First Men event, 10 people for the team tournament, 8 tickets for demos. That's cool. It's cool that people are going to get demos of the game that'll be the Saturday, I think the 25th, might be the Friday, sorry. 16 sold for the championship tournament, and another 8 for the demos on that day, and finally 8 tickets for the last day of Adepticon friendlies. I don't want to sound negative. It's not great. 16 tickets for a 64-man event is a quarter of the capacity that they were hoping to get. To put it in perspective, Teemu, how many people did you have at your event?
18.
So a local event happening in Helsinki, Finland, is bigger than Adepticon is going to be in terms of a Song of Ice and Fire. That's a problem, right? That's a problem, not from the nationals side of it and like invitations to nationals and things like that. That's actually not important. It's a problem because Adepticon's a massive convention. It's a massive convention that gets massive attention across the US and a lot of other Western countries. You know, outside of the likes of some of the big European events, this is probably one of the next biggest events for Europeans. And for the US, it is the biggest event of the season. And to have a Song of Ice and Fire so small at such a big event is not good in terms of image. And that's the worrying thing.
Think about this. Our Facebook community for Song of Ice and Fire here in Finland has 73 people.
Yeah.
And 18 joined in. So that's 25% of all the players in Finland.
Yeah. Now, would I expect them to get close to 64? No, there's obviously still COVID issues in the US. There's still travel concerns. There's all kinds of other issues going on in the US at the moment. And US is much bigger than like European view that we have. Certainly the UK. The US is the size of Europe. You know, that would be like saying, let's have an event at what's the big one? Essen. Let's have a Song of Ice and Fire tournament at Essenspiel. Can we get 64 players to Essenspiel? The truth of the matter is, you could probably get more than 16. Could you get 64 though? I actually do think you might struggle to hit 64 in Essen, because I don't know if that many people from like France, the UK, Scandinavian countries, even Spain, Italy. I don't know if that many people for the Song of Ice and Fire community will travel for an event in Essen. But I would make a weekend of it to go to Essen. Essen's great, right?
Me too.
Yeah. And if it was touted as the biggest event of the season, it would definitely get a lot of hits, I think. But it is a big issue that Adepticon only got 16 players. I do hope more actually end up playing in the event. I do hope the event ends up being bigger. But it is an issue because it's events like this in the US which will dictate a lot of popularity for the game and the support the game gets. I'm happy that the London GT, we will probably be like the second largest or joints, maybe third largest event at the London GT, which is one of the largest gaming conventions in the UK. We're never going to hit 40k numbers. 40k is obviously the beast.
No,
Sigmar,
the London GT claims that it's going to be the biggest ever 40k event this year.
Yes.
In the world. it claims that it will be the biggest ever 40k event that has ever run. They think they're going to break 1,000 players.
Wow.
And Sigmar, was Sigmar the second biggest? What was the second biggest last year?
Last year, Age of Sigmar is the second most popular game. Yeah.
Yes, but it wasn't much more than we're looking to get here, right? It was.
No,
like
Age of Sigmar. Well, last year it hit about 150 or something like that.
Yeah, about 100. I think it was 200.
I think, off the top of my head.
It might have been 200 tickets sold or something, but then I think slightly
Mhm.
less. But I think genuinely, A Song of Ice and Fire is the third largest game at.
It was
London
last
GT.
year. Last time around, we managed to be the third largest system there. It's interesting, like I personally often compare it to Star Wars Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol, right?
Yeah.
They are the most comparable in terms of player base, in terms of appeal. I would say like crossover appeal into a mainstream IP.
Mhm.
I think that Legion is actually a very similar game. It's one of the reasons why I've never bothered to play Legion, because I think that Legion is actually quite a good game too, is because I think that they are both so similar in the way that they play, the way that they build, all those kind of things, that like I don't see why I would ever want to bother playing both of these games myself. But it seems that we at the GT in the past, last year, and hopefully again it looks like this year, we've managed to make a community that massively outperforms the MCP community and the Legion community in terms of size and participation for the LGT particularly. But that isn't true everywhere. Like that definitely isn't true everywhere. And I think that there are a lot of places where those games are becoming significantly more popular, significantly better growth over the past couple of years throughout COVID, come out much stronger the other side of it than they went in. And that is a little bit worrying, because there is only so much space in the tabletop community. Like it's not unlimited, right? Like to say that only one game can be successful is not true at all. But particularly when we're talking about games that are vying to be the third most important game in a community, outside of the GW stranglehold that particularly exists in the UK, right? And also most of Europe, right? Less so in the US, because GW prices, you guys get rinsed. GW, for anybody who doesn't know, GW is way cheaper over here. Everybody else in the world gets absolutely rinsed.
It's crazy, right? Because we would still call GW one of the most expensive game systems in the UK, and it's cheaper here than it is in the US, which says everything about US. Jesus. And Australia, man.
Still, it is the number one game everywhere in the world, effectively. Everybody else competes to be like, can I get close to being as big as Age of Sigmar, which is like the second-rate game for Games Workshop. And I think that's a really important place to be. It's a place that War Machine was for a very, very long time. Possibly even at times more players than Fantasy had. It was possibly took the role as being the second biggest tabletop game in the world.
Guild Ball did a good job. Guild Ball did a.
But it's very important to be the biggest game that isn't Games Workshop, because lots of people want to play the biggest game that's not Games Workshop, because they don't want to play Games Workshop games, right? And I think that places where you can be that will just create more growth, and places where you're sitting as the 6th, 7th, 8th biggest game in any given convention, any given area, even in like a big store, you're the 5th most popular game at the store, because people play 40k, they play Age of Sigmar, then some people play MCP, that can be very popular in certain stores. A load of people play Bolt Action, and then some people play A Song of Ice and Fire. I think that it's such a hard thing to build. I do think it's such a hard thing to build a community. And I really hope and wish that Adepticon could be bigger, and hope that the nationals that we're building to in the US will create growth, not make people look at that game and think that's not really succeeding. I'm gonna stick with the game that I'm at.
This is where, you know, I think a lot of people say that we hate the US, right? People think that we hate the US, but this is actually part of the problem that we see with the way that we see the marketing for the US, right? In that, in the UK, people celebrating success and people celebrating games is obviously always a good thing, right? It's obviously great. It doesn't matter how big a tournament is, then celebrate that. You know, celebrate the fact that you had an event and that people turned up and it was good fun, which, you know, most events are.
Indeed.
Yeah. What's actually frustrating, certainly from a UK perspective, is when we see an event given massive kudos for something it wasn't. And that has a negative impact in the UK. It actually has met massive backlash in the UK. If you oversell an event as saying it was amazing, then a lot of people in the UK go, you're making it up. You're talking bullshit. And it actually puts people off. It has a negative impact. You'll be surprised at how much of a negative impact it can have. You are better off by saying, look, we had lots of people and it was good, than you are saying, look, here's these 20 people who had the most amazing time at the largest event you've ever seen. Because people just look at it and say, oh yeah, but I won't find any players. And that's where Bitchin Cats, God, horrible name to say when you're trying to say it quickly. His comment really rings true actually, and it's really interesting in that the game hasn't got traction in the US in the way that we would think it might. And the fact that 40k obviously and Legion are much bigger in their areas that he plays in. Now that might just be his local area, but the point is that says everything. And you know, I do think that being more honest, being like, right, we're going to go grow the community, have these local events, support the local events because there's something we can aim for, is what Simon wants to do with nationals, and it will work. But it's hard to get over the, in some ways, mistakes of the past that I think they have to face, and I do view them as mistakes. And that's nothing against the community as itself, nothing against the players, and nothing against the community.
Can I just have you try his name again?
Try his name again. Bitchin Cats.
I'm pretty sure it's Bitchin.
No, Bitchin Cats. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying. No, you are right. It probably is Bitchin. I forgot the Bitchin.
Bitchin Cats. Bitchin.
I'm gonna call him Chin from now on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Cats can tell us which way around it is. Put the hyphens in. Tell us where the pronunciation lies.
Yeah. Other people saying, Abiscus saying that Infinity has seen a lot of growth where he is. Abiscus is Canadian. Infinity's weird. Infinity feels like it's been around for a long time. And it's just kind of like been filtering around, and it's picked up War Machine players, it's picked up Guild Ball players, it's picking up other players from other systems, and it's weirdly gaining ground, but it doesn't feel like the community's growing a lot. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those slow burn games.
It doesn't have wide appeal, but it has very dedicated players. I honestly wonder what people think of Song outside of the Song community. Like, I don't know if they think that it's an incredibly small niche game that has dedicated players, or they think it's a casual game that like people who just aren't into games play because it's attached to the Song IP, and they think that it's just like people who like lore and it's a narrative game, or what. Like, I have no idea what they think it is. And a lot of the way you present a big event like Adepticon really does help shape what people outside of the general community think about the game. Obviously, it varies person to person and stuff like that, but there must be an overarching opinion of what people who play tabletop games think of when they think of A Song of Ice and Fire, right? Like, we all have these relatively strong stereotypes, you know, like I see Infinity players as pretty competitive, orientated players, very fast-paced competition style game. I see 40k players as just like entry level players they're just people, right? Like everybody plays 40k at some point. Like if you don't play 40k, if you've never played a game of 40k, do you even play tabletop games? Right?
Unless you're historicals and only, that's the only other
Exactly.
way in, basically.
Well, exactly, and then on the other end, you got you got your opinion of bolt action players, which is people who really don't want change. They don't even want balance necessarily, in my opinion. Like, they don't want change for the benefit of balance. They don't care anything about the competitive side of the game. All my opinions, my stereotypes, what they want is they want strong narrative play. They want to be able to recreate battles that they've read about, and they want to enact them out. They want it to have good game fundamentals, but they're not min-maxers at all. What they want is they want to put, cool things from history onto the table. And I have no concept what people's stereotype of A Song of Ice and Fire would be.
Mm-hmm.
In our community, in the club I'm playing at, we have like 120 members, and also in this event we had a bit more than 100 players playing like 7 different games over the weekend, including a bolt action tournament. And we do run regular tournaments on bolt action too. And I guess at our club, obviously there are cliques that play mainly War Machine Hordes, or they play Infinity, or they play Song of Ice and Fire, for example. But many of us are playing several games, and so we are war gamers. We enjoy a good game system. Of course, with Song of Ice and Fire, as I suppose it's been said 100 times, we also have many players that are coming over from trading card games they used to play for Song of Ice and Fire and so forth, or Game of Thrones. So, yeah.
Yeah. Some other people in chat saying it's a lot of people coming over from fantasy as well.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think the card gamer crossover appeal, the board gamer crossover appeal is where the success in Song can be seen. But it's interesting. It's so, yeah. I mean, where does the community go next? Where does it grow? We will have to see where we feel we're at post US Nationals. Hopefully it will be significantly bigger than last time. Hopefully that will be some kind of indicator of growth for the game in the US,
Yeah.
But growth in the US is not worldwide growth.
Good start.
Europe has, in my experience, and obviously people have their focus around certain places. The game is significantly more popular in Europe than it is in the US. From what I can
let's see
tell.
in 1 year's time, when we're getting rid of COVID, because obviously 2 years of COVID has really stopped arranging like bigger tournaments like this. Like last year, we had to cancel our Winter War event, which has always been the biggest wargaming tournament event in Finland. With, I think, the biggest events we've had been 150 plus players, and now we were 100. So we're coming back, and of course, same thing all around.
I think you're gonna have to issue a quick apology, Carlo, to Finley Ames. He collects a few 40k models, but he's never played 40k, so apparently he doesn't exist.
No, I hold by my statement.
Sorry, Finley.
Finley, it's like a Santa Claus. We all seen him, but we don't really believe in him.
Yeah. Finley, you are a board game player, supposedly. If you've never played 40k, you're not a tabletop player. You must be a board gamer.
But now you're playing tabletop games, so that's good. Also, Finley, feel free to send us a picture of you just to make sure that you do exist. This is going to one of those pictures of someone on a beach that's like a model, and you're like, this guy doesn't exist. Anyway.
I think that Teemu's point is really important. That like we're phasing out of it. It feels like I've said it or I've felt it for such a long time, and is still it, and at some point it's not going to be it anymore, which is the coming out of COVID period is such a unique and important time for the growth of particularly these more niche games, right? Like 40k will always bounce back, but not all games will survive this period. More importantly, this period will establish what is the new, more dominant game. And if the game can see really good activity, like not even growth, like I'm not necessarily saying like you have to have loads of new players. What you need is all the current players to want to play it, be active, be at events, have big showings at big events where people take interest and care. If it has a big presence at these events, then that is what will drive people to think. People love, social confirmation as it is. They love to see other people playing a game and think, yes, this game has life. Yes, this game has a future. Yes, this game must be interesting and exciting. Look how many people are playing it. So the more you can do, the more active you can be in this period of people coming out and looking to discover new games or see what's hot now that they've not really been like on the competitive side of gaming, not being able to go to conventions for the past couple of years, all these kind of things. It's been sort of true for the last 6 months of the last year, maybe, depending on your country, most of all of last year. It's true all of this year. This will establish the lifespan of A Song of Ice and Fire, in my opinion, as to whether or not it is a thing that CMON want to take forward for as long as we could imagine, or it just slowly becomes a niche game that doesn't really have full support from the company.
Aren't they pushing now organized play finally?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that organized play is here.
Yeah.
I wish it had been this a year ago, but they were obviously very, very COVID kind of adverse, shall we say, very, very standoff with their involvement in the competitive community a year ago, believing that they didn't want to really endorse any convention that then may need to be cancelled for COVID, may have COVID-based backlashes. There was a lot of backlash, I think, around Gen Con last year, like the actual official Gen Con, or Adepticon last year. I forget which one. One of them ended up, because it went online only, ended up with all sorts of controversy around it. Hopefully that's all behind us. I think that they have the right plan. We can only hope that the implementation turns out right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that, like you guys said, that there is this attraction, and that's what was a good thing about our event, that we had a 2-day event, but then there was 80 plus other people playing other games, but they obviously all saw us playing it, and there were many people contacting and coming in and asking what's the game. And now what I kind of saw was that earlier, let's say a year ago, we were playing at the club. People were coming like, "What is this game? I've never heard about this." Now they were coming. I've been thinking about starting this.
Yeah.
Clear change. Now people know, and yeah, looking forward. I think we will grow quite a bit here.
That is exactly what it's about, isn't it? And that's what we saw at the GT last year. We saw players coming and playing, watching the game for the first time, seeing the game for the first time, or they'd heard about it. And I won't say there were tons of people coming over, but people did come over and they did look at it. And there's a massive 40k event going on, right? They're coming over, they're talking about it. One guy who came over actually ended up really getting into, was chatting about the games and things like that, saying he's got friends that kind of he thinks want to play it. He actually straight up said to us at one point, I think I'm going to play in this next year. I'm going to pick this up rather than play 40k because I don't really enjoy 40k that much. And it's stuff like that. It was great, fantastic. It's what you want, more players. So yeah. One other thing I did want to bring up, which is what Carl had said earlier in the chat. and it is something that we don't respect so much, and it is some concern for Gen Con, is that the US is very big, and attending these cons is expensive. Now, I'm going to trust Carl on this, so if I'm incorrect, it's not my fault, it's Carl's fault. I haven't done any research, but Carl's saying to attend...
Just like usual.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Carl is saying that it can cost up to nearly $1,000 to attend a Gen Con weekend. Once you account for hotel bookings, once you account for travel, because of course in the US you'll probably get a flight to save time.
To save time, yeah, I'd hope so. Coming
exactly.
Coming from the West Coast.
Yeah. So if that is the case, if it's costing you nearly $1,000 to attend the weekend, that's a very different set of questions rather than the maybe £200 or £300 it costs for us to go down to the GT. So that is worth considering. And that might affect Gen Con, and it might affect Adepticon more so just because of the ridiculous high hotel prices because of the size of the events, right? Yeah, that's the problem. John Caspian in chat before we move on to Teemu's event. We had 20 players for a casual game day last Sunday at Gigabytes Cafe in Atlanta. So they have some form of community going there, which is good, and that's what we like to hear. So it is good to know that the game is growing there, and he thinks the game's got lots of growth potential. John, keep it up. I assume you're like raising the community up there and doing a good job there, so honestly, great. I'll also give Ian a shout out for the work that he does at Fabricators Forge, right? Because Ian does a really good job at doing stuff at Fabricators. Convenient time to talk about communities, really, isn't it? It's a very convenient time to talk about communities because we've got one right here. Me and Carlo don't count as community members. We don't have.
We don't have a community, Mickey. We have a couple of people that we play against.
If anyone's ever seen the Australian comedy where they talk about we're going to tow the boat outside of the environment, me and Carlo, we're not in the community. We're outside of the community. We're not in our own community. We're removed from it, outside community. But yeah, Teemu, obviously your community. I think it's this one. Hey, yes, first guess, first try.
Yes, perfect.
I'm gonna have to move this because this poor guy in the red shirt. I've got his head in view. There we go. Right.
He's not a ball guy. He's the winner.
Oh, he's the winner. Oh, we'll cover his head in, and we'll make it look like you. Well done for winning the event, Teemu. Yeah. So, tell us how it went.
Well, first things first. 18 out of 18 players showed up. We had one cancellation like a week before, but then another guy who was like in a waiting list jumped in, and that was a very, very good show up. I think it was the best compared to the other games, except a couple of those small games where there were like less 10 people. But yeah, and that was really nice because as a TO, I would have hated for many people to drop out in the final moments and have to do like have an unequal number of players. I don't like that at all. So I was very pleased with that. All the players, and there was a huge gap or the difference in the experience of the players. There were people who had played like less than 5 games. And now they played 5 games over the weekend, and they were really just learning the ropes. But everybody was enjoying. That's the feedback I got, and that's what I saw. I really enjoyed all of my 5 games. Won 3 out of them, but that didn't really matter because. And when a good example or a good testimony for this is that we had a vote for who was the nicest opponent. And the guy who won it got 2 votes out of 18 players.
That's insane.
So many players were voted as the nicest opponent, and I think that is telling a lot about the events.
I'll cut in there and actually say something about that. I don't know if it's the game or the communities that help get fostered by the game and the players, obviously, arranging all this. but it is a very common theme that I have seen in a Song of Ice and Fire tournaments, where the vast majority of the time, essentially, depending on the voting system used, that basically everybody gets somebody say to them, "You were my best opponent. Like, I enjoyed playing you the most out of anybody."
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's basically been when we do the systems, we get them to like vote not necessarily for one. You might vote for more than one.
Yeah.
Just and then you count the votes at the end or whatever. But in those cases, if you do it like that, very rarely does anybody not get a vote. Obviously, if you're only voting one person each, it's very hard. Someone probably might not get one, just because you only get one choice, and the chance of everyone picking somebody else is
Even
rare.
I got a vote.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, who would vote for you?
Yeah, exactly. Play Night Watch.
So yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good, and it's actually just a shout out, not to anybody in particular, but every player of the game just seems to be nice, which is just really nice. Because I've met some horrible players of other game systems, some absolute assholes. Except Carlo, he's the only person who plays this game system who's an asshole.
This guy
wearing it with pride.
Yeah.
So yeah, go on. Anyway, keep going.
Well, yeah, we got some prize support from probably like the only Finnish wargaming store that they don't have a physical store, so even from there we have to order. But since in Finland we get the stuff very, very fast, and now we have a good cooperation running. They are like telling us in the Facebook room that now we have this stuff coming. Do you like to like pre-book? What do you want to have? And that's really nice. And I was obviously not very happy about the fact that I did get no reply from Simon organized play contact or email. So that would have been nice. Yeah, we had people from all around from Finland. The one who came from furthest away was like 620 kilometers away from Oulu.
Wow.
So that was cheap to do. And he said that so far I've only played with my little brother and TTS because there's no one else in his town. But I think he was encouraged. He was actually the guy who was chosen as the most nicest opponent.
All right.
So
cool.
he will probably keep on promoting it in his own wargaming community.
That's nice.
And yeah, what else? It felt good to play Night Watch without feeling guilt. So that was good.
Yeah.
And the one funny detail was if you look at what was the ranking on which factions were on top 6, it's only Free Folk and Greyjoy. And it was a kind of funny thing because our players were asking that can we play the Frozen Shore Bears, and we ruled that to all the players and not have anything sort of replacing that. But in the end, the Free Folk won the tournament. All 3 Free Folk players were in top 6, so I think they did quite fine without the Bears.
I think you probably did them a favor.
Could be.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they wanted to use bears. They're great models. Everybody loves them.
They are. They do look. I can't wait to get some. They look really good.
That's right. Of course, why we have these players in a top ranking? These are the players that have played the most, and then of course outside the top 3, from place 4 until place with 11 points until place 9, we're all at 11 points, including myself. So it really went down to secondary points. And
after that, really, it's a toss up, isn't it? Really, at that point.
Yeah.
In terms of ordering, in terms of like how each individual game went, rather than whether it was win or lose per se. So yeah,
exactly.
That's good.
And then I really wanted to run a 5-game event to come up with more difference in the scoring, because if you run 3-game event, you lose 1 game or you do badly in 1 game, there's no way you're gonna win. And I lost my first game. My my veterans, Nightwatch veterans with Othel, Hardened, they were basically one shot in one turn. First, they were hit full with the Hiving Bomb, NCU, and right after that, with a Lance Cavalry attack, even if they were standing on a swamp, even if I had cold hands. I guess I played wrong because I gave them the -1, even if it was a charge.
And you
See?
still died. And you still
I
died.
still fucking died. So,
Oh.
but yeah, I thought I had laid a great trap to get them there, and -2 to hit, no rerolls,
You did
and
leave a
get
good
them
trap.
champ. Yeah, for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, we'll talk about meta and stuff in a second in terms of like what you found worked, what didn't work. Obviously, Free Folk and Greyjoy as well. But yeah, it's interesting.
My
I mean,
lesson, hardest lesson I learned was I was playing my Jon Snow's list with 2 units of Ranger Hunters and then something else,
mhm,
and I had Baylor in Silenced Man,
Mm-hmm.
giving them Hardened, giving them we're never gonna die rule,
Yeah.
and then this NCU that is making them giants.
Yeah.
And oh boy, did I try to kill them.
Yeah.
Once I did.
Spamming multiple attacks against that unit is never going to get through them. You need some.
No.
You need
Auto
some
wounds.
more
You need
supportive
auto
wounds. You need
wounds.
some way
Yeah.
through.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very.
Mm.
Expert duelist, strangely enough.
Expert duelist, indeed,
Mhm.
indeed. I hit with 9 attacks, cost 1 wound.
Ouch. Yeah. Yeah. I think Baylor in Silence Men is becoming a lot of people's go-to, shall we call it? You know,
Yeah.
the hardened for the real hits. Also, you can throw in what's his name? Baron, right?
Mm.
There's so many names beginning with B that are almost the same. Baron, Black Tide, who's the influence to half those if you need it. Actually, kind of optional, can be placed elsewhere. Once you start to see that the Silence Men also bring a lot of morale resistance too. So your problem if you put Balon into a unit more like Iron Makers or something else, that once somebody forces through 1 wound, they can really multiply their damage with morale-based panic damage. But the Silence Men really provide that other dynamic of being very panic resistant at the same time. So they're a real nightmare for a lot of people to deal with a real offensive output too. They seem to be a lot of people's go-to and something that when I become a little Greyjoy fanboy like everybody else, I'll definitely give a go because they definitely seem exciting to play.
There were 8 games played with Baylor, looking at the stats, and 7 games were won out of those 8.
Oh, wow.
So that's 88% win rate. But then again, we have a 100% win rates with Dortmund Giants Bane, Stur Magnar of 10, and Asha Greyjoy. Okay, only 1 game for Asha.
Yeah.
The biggest thing here is that there were 8 games played with Baylor and 7 victories.
I mean, we could argue that the Tormund 4 games 100% win rate, but if you look at the like players, I actually think that Tormund. Well, I'll be interested to see who played him the most. But Tormund.
Presumably across a single player, right?
Three of them were on 1 player. So that's more
exactly that, and he's the winner of our tournament.
Yeah. So that's more dictated by player skill, I would argue,
Yes.
as much as it is the commander itself. Steer at 2 plays again is statistically low, and so is Asher. But Baylor at 8 plays, an 88% win rate, and in comparison, Mance at 9 plays with 5 wins as a comparable other. Baylor's looking good. Baylor is looking strong.
Yeah.
Very
Those
strong.
Baylor 8 games, it sees play across all 3 of the high-rated Greyjoy players. 2nd place, 3rd place, and 6th place. They're all playing Baron, so that's 8 wins.
Yeah.
7 out of 8 wins for those players, spread across multiple people, showing that a lot of different people doing really, really well with Baron. So yeah, I think that Baron could be a real challenger for actual big event wins.
Indeed.
Definitely.
Yeah, and
That's I just want to point out that's really sad. Roose Lannisters, which was actually quite a dominant force in 2021, as like the second Lannister list after the Faith version. A depressing 33% win rate. The control and, like you say, the tie win bombs and stuff like that, just they're not bad, but maybe they're just not good
I think
enough.
they're just. I think Panic is just now such a dice game. So it's such a dice game, and that list relies on Panic so heavily that it's not as reliable as other sources.
Yeah.
Do you think Teemu, for yourself, that the Bengal game was the most difficult? Was he the toughest list that you faced?
Sorry, which one?
Well, you faced Baylor in
Yeah.
right? You think was that your biggest problem? What did the other loss come to? And obviously, Free Folk went and took the win. Do you feel like the Free Folk lists were piloted better, or do you think that they're just really, really strong lists that just are quite meta defining right now?
The guy who won the game, the tournament, Johannes, he's only ever played Free Folk, and he's always run like almost like anti-metalists.
Mm-hmm.
He's been playing Giants all along. He's been playing a lot of with Styr, Magnar, but now he was, I guess, mostly playing with Tormund.
Yeah.
But there is the big guy is there and so forth. But he has really honed his game with this kind of more elite kind of list. He often even plays like 7 activations or something like that with Free Folk. This list has 8 activations, and I think it's a pretty damn good list.
Yeah.
But he's played it a lot. So
this Tormund list has a couple of changes, like 1 or 2 changes that I made, but I do genuinely think is a very good Tormund list. It's the one that Carlo you played against, and I do think it's got a lot of strength to it. So I think that's a good list. I straight away think, yeah, that's got the good backbone of a list. And the Steer list looks. I don't like the Cave Dwellers personally. I just don't think Cave Dwellers are that good. But they are an absolute meme if you're running Steer because of Final Strike. Final Strike. By the way, guys, for any Free Folk players out there, I know that we have this moment, but Cave Dweller Savages with Chosens of Steer, so that you can wound your own units, causing auto wounds back to your opponent when you lose ranks with Final Strike. It's possible that you charge in, maybe do like 2 or 3 hits to yourself, medis, auto wounds. Your opponent hits back, and if it's a big hit, like a Lance Cavalry charge, they might kill your unit, but they'll take like a bunch of auto wounds, and then they'll take Final Strike and go, okay, there you go, take that in the mouth. It's a pretty memey thing to do, but it is funny. Yeah, but no, personally, I can see his lists. I can see how they work. So I no bone about that. Why they've done well there. A good player piloting lists there, which look good. He's not completely memed. He hasn't taken a savage giant. He hasn't completely memed.
True.
But yeah, no.
And he's also one of the most nicest players to play against, and so I think he certainly deserved the victory. What we also see is that quite a few players had one list with 3 NCUs and one list with 2 NCUs.
Mm-hmm.
My list, one had 2 and one had sort of 2 and then Chili. So
yeah,
2 point something.
2.15. or depending on how many rounds you play, but yeah, so that certainly had an impact for sure. I don't know if it's a meta shift, but
I do personally wonder if we are. I am keeping a very close eye myself. I of course quite skewed towards the TTS games that I've been watching, which comes from a relatively small number of players, right? Like, not that many people are playing on TTS, not that many people specifically are playing on TTS and go live and stream, right? So, it's a relatively small sample size, but I am seeing people tending towards doing well with 7 activation lists now. We are seeing that maybe we have actually finally hit the point where cheap spam units are being deleted fast enough by powerful pieces, particularly Lance Cavalry. They're getting chewed off the board quickly enough, and the game going on longer is such a key part to that. The game going on for one more round means that you can get through those cheap units and then get some more value and threaten another unit. You've got a chance to kill 2 4-point units with your 8-point Lance Cavalry and still go on to do something else rather than just like get that second kill in time for the game to end and for you to go, oh, but I've lost on victory points, right? And I do think that we're starting to see a shift. Like, I do think that it's really positive for the game for 7 to be viable. I still think that activations have a really important part to play, but I think that the general move to weakening the 4-point units, the general move to giving more high impact value to powerful units up in the 8-point category, combined with games going on longer, meaning that fighting is just more important. I'm really trying to keep a close eye on. I think that there are 7 activation lists that are definitely way more viable than they were in the past. If you were doing well with 7 in the past, you're probably going to do even better now. If you were always a diehard 8 or 9, such as myself, I'm giving real consideration to 7 as not just this is me making my lists weaker anymore. This is now a thing where I think, is that better? Could that be a better choice here? Am I better off just going out there and trying to kill some stuff and really exploit my opponent's weak points? So I'm super interested to see how it shapes up in terms of activation count. Obviously, it varies list by list, commander by commander, faction by faction. Some factions seem to have the power to do this, others don't. But yeah, I'm so interested as to what we see from tournament wins over the next few weeks, over the next coming months.
Yeah, and I think we also saw quite a bit more attachments than before, which kind of leads to the situation that you might have 7 activations, but your army is certainly more elite and being boosted by these attachments. If you want to take a look at my second list, not the Jon Snow's list, that was very much, everybody was like, or many people were saying that, what is Teemu, what is this list? But this is actually the list I won more with. The Othel Jarvik commander in the veterans, hardened, okay, once they were killed, but not after that. And the cold hands giving synergy to the veterans disrupt. Obviously, now with the Lance Cavalry being quite a popular thing, the Builder Scorpion was what I always played. Okay, I played 3 games against Lannisters, so and all of them have had Castle Rock Knights. So I always played this list against them, and
especially with Overwatch, with the Overwatch attachment.
Exactly, I had the Overwatch, and it worked real well as this psychological barrier for those players, and those who didn't maybe know so well what to do, they were way too scared to come in, and well, one of them even went to an objective sit on the objective with the Lance Cavalry and allowed me to shoot, even if it was 6+ to hit, because they were always, of course, contemplating my honed enhancement or whatever it is called, one of those cards. But I had Othel giving me rerolls, and I was lucky with my dice, so I was getting those 6s, and so I was just
putting holes in things.
Exactly, and then going in with the cold hands and really stopping them, and then I had the senior builder in my crossbows. The typical thing I did, I had my crossbows and the bolt thrower quite in the middle. I moved them forward. In the beginning of the round 2, I'm building those stakes, and I always, as we were choosing terrain in this tournament, I always had another stakes on my other flank, typically in between 2 objectives, like in Game of Thrones. So suddenly, one flank of my enemy is facing 2 stakes
Mhm.
and can't get to my units, and I am shooting. And then, okay, you're welcome to charge my veterans. You will get -2 to hit, and they
Yeah.
are hardened. So welcome.
Yeah. No,
I am actually really, really interested to see what's made of Offal now that, like, I think a load of people are just writing him off as over nerfed, as not playable anymore. But Hardened is still a brilliant ability. His cards are so in line with what other factions see. I think that a lot of people, they're looking at John as John still being a very, very powerful Night's Watch commander. And I do agree. I think that John Hunters still has a lot of play. But as you found, Teemu, like particularly into Hardened, right? Like it has some really, really difficult matchups. It has some really, it has some weaknesses, and it can bring out a lot of healing. It can bring out a lot of, number of actions, number of attacks. But I think there really is still a place for the second list that you pair it with to be something that really can put through auto wounds. At least can ignore armor saves. And I think that Offal genuinely could still be, like not the terror that he was, not a thing that your opponent should be sighing at, rolling their eyes, oh God, I have to play Offal.
Exactly.
A really interesting dynamic, playing the way Offal should play, very defensive, very zonal control based. And I'd be really interested to see like how much he does get played once people get over the fact that he's been so badly nerfed. It's very similar to myself and Pycelle. Like I couldn't see past the nerf for such a long time before I realized, he is actually still really key and important part of what Lannisters are, even at his nerfed condition. And so, I think I really tell people give Offal a chance. Give Offal a go. I think that he could still
I
do
sure
well.
did. I really liked it, and I had 2 very, very different lists. The Jon Snow's list was built against Free Folk and Starks and Greyjoys. Well, we didn't have any Starks, and I didn't get to play any Free Folk. So and one Greyjoy match was against Jaska, who's one of the top players in Finland, and certainly struggled against him. But I think that list I played one practice game. It really didn't work quite that well at all against like Lannister guardsmen and heavy cavalry. So I then fine-tuned the other list to work in this kind of setups, and it did work quite well for me.
Yeah. I actually just want to give a shout out to Johannes, who's in chat today, saying like his experiences in the chat, talking to some of the guys there. I've also noticed Wooden Spoon Sampalaya, who's the guy who obviously made the travel all the way the event and won most nice player. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's in chat as well, and also another Teemu, Teemu Kuvalainen.
Yep. The Baratheon player.
Yes, the Baratheon player who. Hey, I'm glad you won some games with Baratheons because that was something that used to not happen that much. So yeah, cool. Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. I'll just run you through some pictures here. Is that the guy who beat you? Blew you up?
That's the nicest opponent.
Your nicest opponent
from Oulu. Yeah.
Ah, nice, great. Playing Lannisters, what a legend. Hang on, what? Nice people playing Lannisters. This isn't right. Oh,
Unfortunately, he didn't win a single game, so.
Oh.
Lannisters are the new Baratheons.
Are they going to get a fan club and everything?
Yeah. The everybody can be allowed can be really proud of the fact that they're a Lannister player now, and we'll see everybody's true colors come out.
We even had one neutral player playing pure Boltons.
Wow.
Still not a faction.
Still not a faction. Still didn't do very well.
Oh, it's fantastic. Obviously, it's fantastic to see any communities and everything like that.
He won the best painted army second time in a row. So.
Oh wow! For neutrals, does it count as an army if it's neutrals? If they're not a faction, can it be an army? Might have to go back to the voting for that one, Teemu.
It was a raiding horde of Terrible people.
Just sounds like a normal Friday night where we are.
Something like that. Like a football match.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic, honestly fantastic, Teemu.
Yeah.
Great to
I
know
had a
about.
really great weekend, and so I'm really pleased to be able to organize this, and everybody was helping out, of course, and we quickly cleaned it up all up and all that. So I want to thank all the players and people who made this thing happen and helped to organize it. But now I gotta sign off. So any final questions or anything like that?
Anything from you, Carlo?
No, congratulations on a really great event. You know, and I hope that you'll be running another at least next year, if not before. Bigger and better, always. You know, always bigger, always better. Always more fun, hopefully. So good luck to the community, and I hope that those players go away and continue to grow the game in their own local cities and all that kind of stuff.
That's how it looks.
On.
Good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me, guys. See you next time.
See you later, buddy.
Bye.
So, I'll jump to here. I've gotten rid of Carlo.
Of
Let's
course.
just bring
We
Carlo
knew
back.
we knew that would happen.
Oh, there we go.
That's still Teemu.
I've just replaced Carlo with Teemu, but all the time. So, actually, no, I was right. Believe it or not, I shouldn't have done that because I'm now going to do this. Teemu's going to have a go at me because he's going to be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you did this." But I am actually going to send him elsewhere, and it's going to change. There we go. See, look, I shouldn't have moved Carlo. It would have corrected itself. This is why I set up an automatic system to do it. You see, I was actually prepared this time.
We are so seamlessly amazing at this, aren't we, Mickey?
I have to describe that whole event now for what happened on the podcast because podcast viewers are very important to us here at Song of Ice and Fire Stats. People who listen to the podcast. Yeah, I just, as you'd expect, screwed up Carlo's camera. Anyway,
and we all know that the people who come for the live chat are here for me and my face.
Yes, they are purely here for you.
If you're not posting in on YouTube Live, then you know you guys are missing out.
Definitely. On that note, randomly, what was the thing I was going to share with everyone about the podcast? Right, this is literally just because I got this notification. I got an email the other day from the new podcast stuff they're doing. We are randomly the 7th most listened to podcast for gaming in the Netherlands.
To which I responded, all 8 players in the Netherlands must listen.
I just wanted to literally give a shout out to the Netherlands community because apparently people like us there, or they don't like any other games, which is also possible.
I'm pretty sure it's all. I'm pretty sure it's all Wannes.
He just watches it back like 18 times, then listens to it during the week just to make sure. No. Anyway, yeah, big shout out if you do listen to on the podcast, and everyone listening now on the podcast. Thanks a lot for keeping that up. It's a bit of effort for me to do, but I don't mind doing it if you guys listen to it. All right then. So
we talk about a few other events because you know that's not the only event that Free Folk won over the weekend.
It's not. And in fact, if anyone was paying attention to me last week, here's a quick quiz, Carlo. How many events ran this weekend?
Now that's a very interesting...
I wrote this down earlier. It's on this little piece of pad. So look, no hands. I'm not going to write it in now.
Let's see. I think that I said 4, and you told me it was 8, 6.
Oh, you shouldn't have changed your answer.
8.
It was indeed 8. 8 events ran over the weekend. Shall we have a look at them?
Yeah.
Just quickly. Let's hope they all actually finalize the games.
This is a thing which I constantly do, by the way. It's one of the one things that I practically do every single week. Sometimes people create events and they don't sign anybody up and they don't run any games through it. So I just remove them. Right. So, you know, I believe that actually 6, see, this is where I got my numbers wrong. I believe actually 6 were run through the site. 2 more didn't get submitted. I deleted them. So there you go. I'm never wrong, guys. Don't forget, I'm never wrong. Just you have to be quite malleable with what is a fact.
So, there was, I think it was indeed 6 that went. The Miliac conspiracy was in. No, that was actually last weekend. It might have only been 5 that happened this weekend.
Yeah,
or there might
I think,
be one that's not signed off. Now I think about that. It's not. They haven't actually hit the finish button.
Well, I think that the Russian TTS event kicked off.
Yes, that was it. It was Russian TTS, wasn't
but
it?
is still just running. So
Yeah, 'cause
I
it's,
think that so there aren't actually
5
that
wins.
many closed events.
No. So we have got 5 events that we're going to just very quickly look at, and of that, of course, we won't look at the Forest Pond winner of Tavistock, because obviously that's the one that we just spoke about with Teemu. But the other ones we can talk about because they're, we haven't looked at them. There was an event happening in Poland, as is classic with the Polish community, and it was only an 8-player event, quite a small event, but it's won by Free Folk. Obviously, I do think Free Folk are very good. Does it surprise me that Marsara won an event in Poland in that area? No. Marsara does win that event quite a lot. They do quite a lot of that wins. I think if you'd have given him any faction, he probably would have done well, if not win. Do I think that it is do I think it's interesting that he picked Free Folk? Yes. Furioku picks factions that he genuinely tries to win with and do well with, and so he picks Free Folk because he probably thinks they're the best faction in the game. So
there is no surprise that he runs double Mance, for example, right? Because it is well known that double Mance is
the best, probably
the go-to, right? It is the staple, it's the norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like you say, I think Marsara picks Free Folk because he believes that Free Folk are the best faction right now. Mm-hmm. So it is telling. It's very interesting when you look at a player like Marsara at what they're playing, because he has no allegiance to a particular faction, and with no negative connotations at all attached to it. He plays what he believes is the best in the game, and I think that is absolutely flat out 100% fine.
I do think that he is
very interesting to look what he picks.
I do think he is somewhat limited by physical. I don't actually know if he owns every single army. I'd have to ask him.
Yeah.
Because I think he did get rid of some of them. But I know he does own Free Folk, and Free Folk is always a faction he used to play anyway.
Yeah. I also did pick up on what Carl's talking about, which is his club affiliation is that he is Peter, it's your time. Unfortunately, Peter came fourth after being in the final with Marsara, so it almost was Peter's time. Peter almost got a win, but he didn't quite snatch the final. I think it might have actually been quite a close game if you look at it. I think the result could have been close. Actually, he got crushing wins in every game, so it
was 11-2.
Not that close. It's a different game.
There you go, that's a nice close game, 11-2.
There is a different game. Cheltenham Bunker was won by an incredibly close margin, now that I remember.
Yeah. Which we'll look at in a second anyway. But yeah, obviously congratulations to Marsara. I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, you did really well. Obviously he did really well, we know that. But it's also not a particular surprise to himself. One thing that is a surprise for those of you that watch, and, absolute fan favourite here among Carlo, mostly. And, yeah, let's face it, he's a lovely guy. Bloodraven is playing Greyjoys. Anyone didn't know that?
I hadn't even noticed Bloodraven was in the tournament, because I hadn't looked that far down the table. I expected him...
Yeah, he's playing Greyjoys now.
Yeah. It's the
friends?
natural progression for every poor fellow lover to move on to be to just go and spam archers and spam trappers. It's the only logical conclusion.
If the ones listen to this back and making a time recording, can you just remember to stamp this particular point in time specifically? So Carlo's saying it's a logical progression for Lannisters to go to Greyjoys. So when he starts playing Greyjoys in the very near future, when they're pretty good, I said it was a logical progression. It's got nothing to do with their power.
No, I've always said Greyjoys will be my next faction, and I'm going to be spamming the shit out of archers and trappers, right, guys? I'm sitting here saying that Marsara's a great guy. Look at the strong armies he fields, because that's me, right? Like I ain't putting trash on the board, guys. Like, you know what I mean? I'm attracted by the interesting power that Greyjoys currently have, right? Like, I'm not just interested in them as a faction. I'm not interested in them as their background. I'm interested in the power that they can bring to the table. And I think that they are a very powerful faction. But I think that currently, right now, the earliest winners of our early tournaments, our early season winners, are Mance right now. Mance.
And
In case people don't know, it's a bit of an aside, but Mance has taken number one spot in the total rankings. He is off the back of a very strong performance over the weekend. 3 tournament wins, I think.
Yep.
Well, technically, one of them wasn't Mance. It was that Tormund Steyer pairing that we saw, which
but that
helped
brings
bring
his average
Free Folk
up. Yeah.
as well. Brought Free Folk as a whole faction up towards the top. But Mance has taken number one spot. We see Offal and Mother of Dragons both falling. There's been a huge amount of discussion about whether or not the rankings should have been reset, right? But Offal is being played. Less so maybe with Mother Dragons. Like, people really aren't happy with that change, but she is falling. They are falling. They will find their correct place.
Can I just point out?
It is just a choice.
Anybody watching? Teemu literally just talked about how he played Offal, and it wasn't as bad as people think. He literally went to an event and he won games with Offal. Like people are like, oh my god, he's shit. He should be like absolutely like dropped down. But if he's winning games with him and he's not losing games with him, then no, he shouldn't drop down. Do I think it's probably? I don't think he's probably as good as he was. I do think he's been changed.
Absolutely.
But I don't think he's as bad as people think. Otherwise he would have been plus.
Offal is falling.
Yeah.
But honestly, I
bring it up.
I think that Offal will fall to about a plus 50. I think the Mother of Dragons will go lower. I think the Mother of Dragons, if played enough, will really come really quite far down. I think that she got hit with the nerf bat on every single metric.
And it is
so,
if someone was to be brutally honest and said, is it a problem that MOD is quite highly rated? I actually do think that that's a more interesting discussion for the data because, and I spoke about this with players earlier in the week, in that MOD's current play rate, I haven't looked at it today, but when I measured it before, it was 4 games. 4 games in the play rate that we expected, and to give a comparison, I looked at other commanders who were achieving what I thought were high-level play rates and medium-level play rates in the meta. Offal had something like 12, which was quite a low end. Mance was looking at about 30 to 40. Gregor was looking at 40, and I think Eddard, which we know is one of the most popular commanders, probably of the changes, Starks being one of the largest change factions, had something like 50 games played. So actually, if you look at it, I think it was 48, I think. Offal ended up being about a quarter of the play rate as Eddard, and I didn't check this out, but I assumed Eddard was one of the most played. So I took the assumption, said he's a quarter of the play rate. Mother of Dragons, with 4 games, puts her at a 10th of the play rate. That is something we could talk about, and we could say maybe that's a problem. Because that's actually equivalent to neutral play rate at this current moment. And we've already known that neutrals have never found their true home in the data, really, because they just don't get played enough. It's crazy to think that even with all the data that they have, they're probably still worse than the data suggests. They just still don't get played enough compared to other stuff.
I actually don't think that Offal will be played any less than he used to get played, because he was actually so
underplayed,
so toxic in the way he was viewed, that he was so underplayed by what his power level suggested that competitive players would play. It was only in the biggest events, the most competitive places, that you ever found him fielded. And now I think that people feel liberated to play him, try him, and liberated to try different list builds with him. So I'm really interested to see where he does end up. Mother of Dragons, well, maybe she'll sit too high for too long, and well, that's something that will happen. But I don't think that. But the point is that the stats, they're a number which is created from the information that we have.
Yeah.
You can add your own thought process to that. You must add your own thought process to that.
Yeah.
Do not discount it. Nothing can and should be discounted. If you just look at them and be like, that's wrong because I don't think it's right, well, then you learn nothing. But you have to take it as a starting point and then think about why it is that way and what that can do to help you learn more about the game. And if you can look at Mother of Dragons and say, oh, her rating is higher than I think it is because I know she's been significantly nerfed recently, then you don't need to know anything else, right? But if you look at this and you look at Othel, for example, and look at his actual data and you're like, wow, he's not going down, then we could learn something, which is maybe Othel is still strong. Like, yes, he was nerfed, but is he actually now a bad commander? And that is something that we can really learn from like looking at what trends he has. We don't just look at it and be like, Othel must be the second best commander in the game, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. We've just gone through a huge set of changes. We look at how things are trending, we look at where things are moving, and they give us indicators of what is popular. Popularity is also a really important part of what stats does, in my opinion, because popularity can help us understand what things we will face, right? Like understanding not just what is strong, but what is popular means that we can make sure that when we come to a tournament, we're ready for all the popular things, the things that we're most likely to see. So, you know, like I do think that there's been a lot of discussion recently, and I stay out of the discussion in general, except when, you know, like it comes up to like a really specific question on that's Facebook group. Other than that, like a long time ago, I learned to just like step away from the Discord discussions. I try not to like defend stats even anymore. You know, like some other people do defend it. You know, Mickey still gets really riled up and defends it at times, but like I actually just think that people really misconstrued the way it can and should be used. And I've told people again and again and again, like what I think the best ways that people can use it. But me sitting there and lecturing people and arguing with people and trying to educate them on what I think that its proper use is has never really helped in the past. So I just like don't believe everything everybody else tells you about stats because honestly, it's mostly wrong. It's mostly wrong. Just go and learn what you can from it. Use it in ways that you think are interesting. And if you have questions, then come and ask. Like, come and ask me, and I will give you my opinion. Lots of the Patreons, they ask questions about, you know, like, oh, is this, you know, there are some who really are just super actually interested in the mathematics and stats side of things. Some people come and ask me, you know, like, oh, is this like a zero sum system? And like we like talk about like the things that I'm interested in, right? Like the things, a lot of the reasons why I created it, a lot of the maths that is behind it. And I enjoy those discussions. But when we're just talking about what is right, what is wrong, whether or not Mance is overpowered, whether or not, you know, whether or not Othel should have been nerfed as much as he was, whether or not Mother of Dragons is shit now. I'm so not interested in those discussions. Like they're not why I made stats. They're just it's supposed to be a way to learn. It's supposed to be a way to make ourselves more informed. It's not supposed to be a way to win an argument. It's not supposed to be a way to prove somebody else is wrong and to put somebody else down. And yeah, Tim, there could and should be an FAQ page. Yeah. What do you mean it's not all super intuitive to everybody else, and you don't understand all the things that go through my mind without me ever actually telling you them?
It's definitely true to say that what you should be doing is looking at the stats, and if you agree with it, fine, whatever, move on. If you disagree with it, go away and think about why you disagree with it. And actually, one of the things that we will actually sit here and say is me and Carlo disagree. Our opinions will disagree with what some of the stats say. Like, we do that. We do have opinions that are like, we don't believe that this is that bad, or we don't believe this is that good. And so we try to do something about it.
Me and Mickey get into some pretty heated arguments about it sometimes.
Yeah, we do. And we go away and we're like, no, this is way better than the stats say it should be. And we actually almost try and prove it, right? Or we follow the stats sometimes and go, right, well, whatever. But the point is it's supposed to challenge your opinion. If you don't know about something, this is what stats can do: is it can challenge your opinion on it. And I will sit here and still tell you that I have no idea why Walder was the best piece in 2021, and I haven't thought about A Song of Ice and Fire at all. I played like 2 games last week, legitimately applied 0 thought to the games or 0 prep or anything. The only thing about A Song of Ice and Fire in the last week I've thought about is why the fuck is Walder so good? Because I cannot see it. For the life of me, I cannot make a list which I feel happy with. And yet he wins games.
I have one in mind.
You have one in mind?
Secret tech.
Oh, can I guess? Is it a new Mother of Dragons list?
No.
Is it a Baratheon list? Because I think there might be a Baratheon list that actually might be really good with Walder in my head. But I don't know.
Yeah, Mickey, Wannes is he's got you clipped as saying, "If you disagree, go away."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Carl's got a question. This is where our usual Tourney Ground of we didn't really have anything to discuss this week. There wasn't any big news. Becomes a 10-hour stream. But,
yeah.
Brian, I will try and answer your question if you ask it, Carl.
Brian actually on that point says Mammoth Rock, and actually Brian's a very good example of this. Brian, like we've always said, and Brian always says, I don't believe the stats, I don't believe it, but he does it in a kind of like, I don't care what they say, I'm going to do what I want to do. And Brian, obviously coming away, and I will talk about Brian very briefly, because he actually is the subject of this next part, A Dance of Daventree. He won an event with Free Folk. And he ran mammoths, and he, as always, he loved old mammoths when they were 2021 garbage, and he loves them now. And you know what? I disagree with him. I always used to be like, no, mate, the 2021 mammoths just weren't good. But that didn't stop him running them, and it hasn't stopped him trying them out and doing things with them and enjoying them. And then he's come away and he's won games with them, and like, has he challenged my understanding of them? Yeah, I was unsure about the Season 1 updates and how it would change them, but it does mean that I'm now going to look at his lists, I'm going to look at what he was running, and I'm going to go, okay, but why did you manage to make them work in this way? And Brian will say it's all about the dice. Don't believe him. That's what he likes to pretend. But I'm going to go away and look at it, and I'm going to think, right, okay, what does the Mammoth actually give you in the list building, and can I make Brian's list better? Is it possible for me to go away and go, I like the ideas here, can I make them better and make my own lists with the basis of why Brian was using that component in his list? Like, that's what stats is all for. The learning side and the challenging side that you can get. And I've definitely been surprised by some things in the last couple of weeks where I was kind of like, I think this is shit, and I've never seen it used well. Me and Carlo had an argument the other week about Unsullied Swordmasters. I think Unsullied Swordmasters are garbage with an officer in. Carlo's the other way. He thinks they're amazing.
I don't think they're amazing, right? They're not garbage.
I think they're utter garbage. But that's because in my free folk eyes, when I played against them, I just don't care about them. Whereas against other players, they might be good, the factions.
They won me a game against Starks, like single-handedly. They were by far the most important unit. That precision versus hardened versus all these things, like it's felt so key. But yeah,
they actually won. To be fair, they also won you a game against me, except for the fact that basically anything would have done because I just couldn't kill anything. So, bloody chasing around the map. Anyway, yeah, congratulations to Brian for Dance of Daventree, the event that was run by Graham Tane. I couldn't remember his name.
The
Tane. Yes, I knew his thingy. But yeah, obviously congratulations there to Brian for winning that event with his Starks. Commiserations to Stephen Connor, Psycho, for coming in second with Starks, literally losing out because he didn't get a crushing and he had less UDs as well. But both 3 wins each.
But I mean, Wardens of the Northwest coming 1, 2, 3 is a really, really strong showing from the Liverpool lads. They're a very good group. They are really, really good.
Apparently, the journey home was a bit awkward because they all travelled together.
I'm sure. So I believe Brian beat Colco in the final. And I believe that Kolko got given a prize as being the person who lost on the top table, as opposed to the person who came second.
That's
so I
great.
believe that of the three of them, Stee is the only one who didn't get a prize, even though he was undefeated.
Yes.
So
That's a win. That's a win for everyone. Steve not
yeah,
getting a prize.
yeah. At least,
No.
at least that's what I've gained from Brian's great blog. I mean, you can read all about the games that Brian played in his blog. Always
Indeed.
there. There
Yeah.
are a lot of pictures from the event.
Brian does that. Brian does a lot of pictures and a lot of great information. I'm always surprised because I've never seen Brian play a game. I've never actually watched one of his games, but I'm actually confused if he actually plays the game or if he has someone else play the game for him while he just has a camera. Because he seems to capture literally
I've
every
played
moment.
Brian quite a few times. Yeah, he just spends most of the time that's not his own turn taking photos. And yeah, I think he's great to play against. And I would not be able to play that well if I spent all of my opponent's turn not thinking about the game, but instead pointing a camera at the table. So I'll absolutely give him kudos for being able to play as well as he does while pointing a camera at the table most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think that was a really, really brilliant event. One no-show out of what was a 16-player event.
Yep.
He's here in chat. Tane, why did you not quite feel confident enough to TO and play on the day? I'm surprised that you didn't step into that last 16th spot, but it looks like a great event. Otherwise, I'm sure everybody had a great time, and I really hope that it seems like it's the start of another strong community in and around that area. There is a good mix of local players with some players traveling, a number of players, like maybe anywhere up to like half of these players kind of coming out and saying on the UK Discord that this was going to be their first ever event. We see Carly, who's been, writing a lot of articles over on Frontline Gaming, talking about tournament results and the meta in general. Clearly very, very into the game, but I believe it was the first time that Carly made it out to an event. So that is really, really brilliant to see, and hopefully just becomes another staple name in amongst the community. But there are loads of names that you've seen here before if you've been in and around the UK.
Ben Harris is another one. Panzer, I know for a fact he was first game. I believe that he was one of the guys that the Tane was actually basically teaching, and getting them up to is introduced to the game. And there's quite a few that I think it's the Battlefield hobby guys. I think are all a relatively new scene, and that's obviously the place in Daventree where it's hosted.
Yeah.
The Tane's creating there. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier in the episode in terms of building community and getting players involved. This is exactly the kind of thing that works, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this was the most amazing kind of well-funded, well-organized event you'll ever have gone to, and he's done a great job. But the fact that he's done a good job getting 16 players, or him and 15 players, I guess, together in an event, in a store, running games, is all you need. That is literally people who think it's a lot of effort. It is more effort than people will give you credit to. It is effort, but it's worth it. That's the thing. It's worth the effort. And
I hope you felt like it was worth it, and I hope to see another event come along. I would have gone down myself were it not for like that. I am very, very few spare weekends at the moment, but hopefully give it another 6 months, and I'll be at every UK tournament going again. I'll be every up and down the country every weekend, playing games with anybody who'll play me. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be another event coming out of Daventry soon, and good luck to the players who played for the first time, and I hope that it's improved your lease of interest in the game.
The team there just saying the 16th player who was due to come thought it was next weekend. Got their weekend next. That happens. That literally happens all the time. So yeah, but no, it's fantastic to see people arranging, events, and when an event goes well and everyone enjoys themselves, like that for me is a great event. It doesn't have to have the song and dance and whistles and things that some events have. The GT, for example, for us is one of the best events of the calendar season. But it's not the event itself that makes it good, it's the players. And if you get a lot of players together, it's just a nice event because there's so many nice people in the community. Honestly, I'll reiterate it, but one of the best parts of the GT last year was, of course, not the games, but it was sitting down of an evening on Friday and Saturday night, having drinks with people after COVID. First time I'd met them, catching up, just chatting bare shit, watching Carlo play Flesh and Blood. That was actually one of the best parts of the weekend for me because spending time with people that you kind of like and have shared interests in is arguably better than anything else.
Kind of.
Well, yeah.
Maybe.
Whoa. Come on.
We're not going too heavy on the actually like.
I had to be careful because Chris Eustace, that guy, what a tosser. And Kolko, jeez, I won't say what I think about Kolko behind his back. No, they're great guys. Shout out to Kolko and Gregors and things like that.
But getting back to it, can't deny double Mance with the win.
Does it
double
count?
Mance with the win.
Does it count?
Eddard and Bryndon Tully.
Yeah.
In an undefeated combo.
See, that I believe is the Bryndon list that he kind of basically used to run. Yeah, it's basically the Bryndon list he used to run, I think, or similar to it, which has seen basically only buffs. So that's good.
Yes, he's been a long time Stark player. He took Starks to 4th place at the Always Winter GT before the changes. You know, like he massively outperformed what I thought Starks could do at the GT. So you know, he's definitely a force to be feared with them now, with that experience under his belt.
Definitely. All right, so that was Brian. Do check out Brian's blog. Links available in chat. I say that. If Brian, if you want to post a link for it in the chat, feel free to do that because it requires me to have some effort. Oh, go on, I'll do it. There we go. That wasn't that much hard, was it? Because I actually have it already loaded up. I'm an idiot.
No, yeah.
Really. Anyway, well, I have to jump
really
into. I have to post it as you by jumping into your account on, something else. But that's fine. We won't go into that now. Yeah, I can pretend to be Carlo. It's great. Anyway, the Dance of Dragons in Russia went ahead as well. This is an 11-player Swiss event, as usual. And this was run by Dvinya, a Baratheon player, going 3 and 3. 3 for 3. One other player, another Free Folk player, came in 2nd place. I can't pronounce his name. I'm not going to try. But Rattleshirt Mance. Did he run Rattleshirt? Mance, Rattleshirt, man. He did run Rattleshirt one game.
There we go.
And it was a close 7-6. He should have ran Mance. Yeah. Baratheons, Loris and Courtney running double Renly side.
Renly side
has been.
What's Loris in? Is Loris in Rose Knights or is he in the fabled Thorn Watch?
He's in Stags.
Oh God, Jesus! I don't know if I agree with that, but okay.
Look at that.
It's the Barrow Wardens with Master Wardens, which I think a lot of people are really strong on, shall we say? Like, you know, they're really liking them. I'm unconvinced, right? I'm never happy with that many points put into a slow movement 4 unit with high armor and stuff like that. I'm not a pro tanky unit player, which is odd because I generally play quite defensive armies. But people are loving them.
I will say, in terms of like why the strategy might be working, the traditional way, of course, with wardens and stuff similar, was that they would charge you. You could charge them if you want to alpha strike them, get them low, whatever. But you could even let them charge you. It wasn't that big a deal most of the time. And then you just reverse and you still control a point. With points, generally speaking, not being the way that you win games as much anymore. I do think the killing style means that people are more likely to engage them. Also, the Master Warden actually has a very subtle, interesting ability here. Because later on, you don't mind it when you get activated. If you're in combat with a Master Warden, you didn't care if they activated and attack you. In fact, that was a good thing, because then what you did, regardless of how much damage you took, you retreated off and you control your objective. But nowadays, if they activate in on you, they go, have like 4 or 5 hits, smack, and then I'll attack you. And actually, that damage against the weaker units they typically see play into, that That actually racks up. So suddenly the wardens themselves aren't doing damage, but the hold the line order on the wardens is actually a threat that has to be played around.
Yeah, I do think it's very interesting combining. You know, most people are seeing hold the line combined with a unit which is relatively defensive.
Yes.
It gives the defensive unit an aggressive look, helps to really give them some punch, but also it basically says, like, if you don't attack me, my offense is high, and if you do attack me, well, I at least get to use my defensive abilities for once. Because the main problem in the past was never getting use of your defensive abilities.
Yeah.
Because nobody would bother to attack you. But now, if people leave you on full ranks, then you're just talking, is it 5 hits? Is it 2+ ranks?
2+ ranks.
Yeah, 2+ ranks. And even when you go down, you know, like, that's still a lot of hits. We do see the new Thorn Watch making an appearance. I find that quite interesting that that's not with Loris, because I do actually think that Loris has an interesting play in them.
Yep.
Being able to dance Duelist around, get it in and out, and bounce it in and out of combo. That's where I would put him in that list myself, and let the Stag Knights do their own work. But clearly, it's working well enough for him. Courtney, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, Courtney's a very control commander though.
Interesting that we see Champions of the Stag. I've played them myself. I played them into a Baratheon mirror, and they did great. But that was a Baratheon mirror where obviously we're going to end a lot of combats engaged. We're going to have a lot of protracted grinding combat. They did start to really pull their value in that game. They did. Their vulnerable was at its best use. I was facing a lot of 3+ armor. And wow, we see Stag Knights with Loris as an actual expert duelist here. But yeah, I think
yeah,
interesting, powerful lists.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, obviously congratulations to Daniil Dvinya, Dvinya, however you pronounce it. Butchered that. And yeah, generally, you know, hopefully that was a great event as well. And the last event.
Somebody a while ago asked, you know, how did Baratheons do when we talked a little bit about the tournaments in general?
Yeah.
Right, like Baratheons won that tournament, but the thing that we haven't looked at a lot is Baratheons also still continued to come last or close to last in a lot of other events, right? Like Baratheons still remain a difficult faction to play. They still are not an absolute powerhouse. I still think that they're mid-table at best. And actually, despite winning one of these events, over the weekend as a whole, they lost ranking. Whereas what we see from this weekend right now, it's only a small number of results by comparison to the whole number of results we expect to get over the coming months. Free Folk were either winning events or placing very, very well.
Yep.
In almost every event, the faction with the highest win rate this weekend was Free Folk. And that's what saw Free Folk take the number 1 spot with Mance. And also the faction take the number 1 spot for a while. I don't believe that they're there right now. I think they might be in number 2 right now.
I believe that.
But for a while, they were the number 1 faction overall. They are, yeah, there we go. They are currently the number 1 faction. That is because, not just because you're winning the event, it's because you're performing well across a whole range of players. A whole set of people are coming second and third and going unbeaten, even though they didn't win. And all those things add up. That's the more holistic view that Song of Ice and Fire Stats takes when it looks at the ranking of factions. It's a lot more involved than just like what won this tournament. It looks at what won and what lost, every position in between, and you know what was the expected outcome from every given player based on their previous performances. So you know, Free Folk currently look like the strongest thing to come out of the balance patch, but they were already pretty high and they didn't see significant change, right? Like, I think that there are other factions out there like Starks who have seen much bigger changes in the way that they now look at list building, the way they look at winning games. It's interesting that Psycho Stee, he went unbeaten while using an army list which is almost unchanged from what he was using last edition. Teemu talked about it a lot. players with a lot of experience with their own list will do so much better than those who don't really know what their units do, how to get the best out of them, how to really work every synergy that the list has. Also understanding like what will play well into various matchups. So I think that it's interesting that Free Folk have a current bump, and I think that it's because Free Folk lists haven't changed a lot. And I think that there is room, not necessarily for some wild new meta list to define itself from Starks or from Targs or from Night's Watch. But I think that all three of those factions, they'll have a period of learning for players, particularly in how to get the most from their lists. And I don't think that Free Folk are necessarily dominant. I just think that the meta is still shifting and finding its feet.
It is.
I said it last week. I think it's just a straight up positive that there isn't just a standout right now. Like, I don't think that Mance is just a straight standout, the best thing in the game. I just think that he is a very strong choice that has been strong for a very long time. And there's a lot of Free Folk diehards who really know how to play that list. And I agree with Charles Cassier. The change to Offal specifically and to the Gunline list was the nightmare of the Mance list, right? And Free Folk in general. That terrible matchup going away has really enabled Free Folk to take the position that they probably always held in terms of other matchups, in terms of other win rates over other factions.
Yep, I completely agree with that. I actually want to say that the big thing with Free Folk is that I think that there are a lot of list building opportunities, and one of my list builds that I came away, and I still use, because I entered it into an event, was one that I came up with on the night we played Carlo. And it had new stuff in it that I hadn't used before. But actually, I felt very comfortable saying that if I actually take an 8 activation or 9 activation Mance list in the way that I used to build them, I actually think it's probably just as good. If not, like, okay, the Spearwives are a little bit worse, but that's an ethos change that I would have to play with the list slightly. I don't think the list is bad. I just think it's slightly different. That's obviously a problem in that, not Free Folk not receiving any major changes, and I am under the opinion that, in a couple of weeks' time, a couple of months' time, we could be sitting and having a discussion about why or how Mance should be changed. I do think that the thing that Charles Terra said in chat, that Raiders going to 8 morale might be a good idea, but actually the only real person that impacts more than anybody is the other Free Folk lists, which are not showing across the grand scheme of things to have the power level and the powerhouse that Mance is able to put across. But they aren't bad. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're bad. They're not. Steer, I think, is a good second choice. I think Tormund is a lot better than his ranking suggests. Especially with the change to Thens. I think Thens really helped Tormund. But I do genuinely think that Mance should get changed. I do think there's a discussion to be had on Insignificant and Raiders, and is it possible to balance Insignificant properly in the game? I do think that that's a worthy discussion. I do think that we could sit here and say something along the lines of, is Endless Horde a problem card? I do think Endless Horde... I'm not even going to sit here and joke to you. I was speaking with Ariakis. He played against Furioku last night, I think it was. And Furioku beat him in the team event. And he said, yeah, he played both Endless Hordes on round 1 and round 2. To which point I said to Ariakis, well, I'm sorry, mate, you've probably just lost. Like, there is probably play. There are probably things that you can do. But I hate the fact...
The vast majority of lists cannot play into that, right? No. Call Raiders... I mean, Raiders are practically a 4-point unit, right?
They're a 4-point unit. They're a 4-point unit.
They are a 4-point unit. They have adaptive. Yes, the adaptive... Yes, when you bring them on for free, they don't come with any attack, right? So you can toss up whether or not you say they're a 4-point unit or 3.5-point unit or a 3-point unit. But to be honest, they're practically at the 4 end, right? Like, they're a very high-performing 3 with adaptive. which
Well, the
probably isn't a
difference-
1-point ability.
The difference
so,
is they're a stat line of a 4, with arguably you could say negatives that make them more like a 3-point, but the insignificant basically turns them into a 4-point unit at that point. That's the thing.
absolutely.
Yeah. And then adaptive on
and
top. But
And yes, there are certain tempo hits and stuff like that. And yes, you've had to get hold of a couple of cards and play a couple of cards. But the reality is that not much has happened if they're played on turns 1 and 2. Not much loss happens. And you are playing 40 points against 48 points at this point.
Yep.
Right? That is.
And 2 extra
wild.
activations. 2 extra activations as well.
Yeah, I mean, just forget the activations.
Yeah.
It's straight up 40 versus 48. Outside of Old Awful, I can't think of a single list that wins if you play a 40 versus 48 game, right? Against a properly well-constructed 48 points that is going out there to win as much as possible. Call it 46 if you want, right? Like we can just make them 3-point units. If you played 40 versus 46 in a couple of equally skilled players, there is almost no way that the 40-point list ever wins the game, right? And if Endless Horde happens round 1 and round 2, that's just how you have to see the game from then on. Endless Horde can come up rounds 4 and rounds 5, and it's not going to have the same impact. That
it might work as a
Sword
comeback
zone will cause such a different tempo shift. It will be an actual sacrifice to take horses and swap it at that point. Whereas if you take it on turn 1 and turn 2, there's no loss. There's no problem in doing that. And yes, there is the chance that you could bring back a more powerful unit, but most strong Free Folk armies right now, they're not bringing Bone Lord's Chosen being the only other unit which is really significantly a buff over the
army is built on the backbone, is what I said. The army is built on the backbone of 4 and 5-point units.
Yeah.
And there may be attachments in some of those things, but actually it's not the point. You have 4 and 5-point units, and that's all that matters. And that's all that you can realistically build into your army. Yes, you can include mammoths at 6. Yes, you might take giants at 7. Yes, you might include 1 at 8 or bears. Yes, you might even look at 9 for mag. But you're not building lists with those things in mind necessarily. They're a one-of in the list. They're not the backbone. Yeah. So I would happily have a discussion about Endless Horde and the ways it changes. I do think that it's a problem for game balance. And I spoke about it in terms of the Targaryen matchup, in that I think the Targaryen matchup is stupid because of the problem that Endless Horde has and the very bipolar nature that field control has with it. I hate the Targaryen matchup as a free folk player. Not because I feel like it requires skill or anything like this. I just hate this idea that if I do this thing and my opponent doesn't have a counter, I probably just win. Against an equally skilled opponent, right? Whereas if he has the counter, he probably just wins. There's no skill involved. There's very little skill involved in that. And the rest of the game we then have to play with skill. Sure, skill comes into the matchup still. But if you've played an opponent, me and Carlo played it multiple times. We actually, most cases when we play the Targaryen free folk matchup, we actually probably know the winner in the first 2 rounds, right? Like, it is actually that easy to tell who the winner's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's very. I hate Endless Horde. It's Endless Horde that's the issue. I have my own problems with field control. I think field control is an extremely powerful card, but that's got nothing to do with Endless Horde. I just think field control is an extremely powerful card.
That's the thing. I think the field control is a crap card.
I think it's extremely powerful. Except you don't ever see it.
You still get to shift. It still allows you to put a unit into somebody's flank. It still allows you to. The most of what a maneuver does is it allows you to get an action that you otherwise wouldn't get, right? It allows you to enable a charge when a charge is blocked, or it allows you to turn a really long bomb charge into not a long bomb charge. It allows you to shift yourself so that you can't be charged, so you can deny an action as well as allow an action.
Yeah.
And yes, you give up the weakened, but I actually think that the only real significant play that it has is denial of a retreat.
Yes.
Is actually, I think that its only significant impact, that and its complete absolute fuck you of Endless Horde, which is the only reason why I think that it's important.
Well, I do think it's still a decent card because it's a control piece. Anything that offers you some element of control can always be decent. But, and this is the discussion on wilding diplomacy that I see people having in chat, any control piece has elements of ways and ways of playing around it. It's like, sure, I can shift 3 and I'll be weakened, but I still get what I want, like Carlo was saying. Vice versa, if you really need to pivot and field control comes down, it's like, fuck. I didn't actually
I mean,
move.
if he's like in your rear,
Yeah.
right? Like, and what you want to do is turn around. But like I feel like field control's actual power plays are such corner cases,
yes.
and not the generic thing.
No, but the point still stands. I mean, we can have different opinions on that the whole time. I would definitely entertain a discussion changing Endless Horde. I do think it deserves a change. I do think it's a massive issue.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact if I have it in my opening hand and I'm going first, my chance of win just skyrocketing. I don't need statistics to tell me that. My chance of winning skyrockets.
I hope that like the changes to Clash Kings, changes to Here We Stand, or is it Here We Stand?
Yeah, Here We Stand. Clash of Kings.
I never know which one's which. Here We Stand. Yeah.
No, Here We Stand. Sorry. Here We Stand. Sorry.
That they don't respawn, right? I think hopefully they understand and take that forward to the fact that respawning anything in this game is inherently problematic. Like, I do think that like it's the design aspect that is just so problematic, and I understand that they want to think that the free folk want to play in a certain horde style mechanic, and that's how they feel like one of the ways is like no matter how many you kill, they just keep coming back or whatever. But I hope I don't see a way to balance that card myself outside of getting rid of it and it just being a different card.
I think that's. I mean, straight away, I do think it's powerful. Obviously, I do think if you removed the obvious nerf, is you need to remove the ability to just deploy a raider unit. Like that just needs to go. Why that was ever an option they thought entertained making the card like that good? You can just play a raider unit. That's just stupid. I think that has no place in the game. I think that is in the nicest possible sense, it takes about 3 iotas of a second to look at that and go, well, if I get the opportunity to do it in the first 2 rounds, I'm going to do that. Obviously.
Biscus asks whether or not I think that you should take horse every possible opportunity against free folk. Yes. Flat out.
It's part of the reason why
it is the only action in the whole game where... Okay, so I'll tell you the specifics of the Targaryen matchup. Say I win first turn, right? Like, I have choice. I get to look at my hand, don't forget, right? So this is very important because the Targs has the specific added thing of field control. If I draw my starting hand and it does not contain field control, then the first thing I say is, I'm going first, and I take horse.
I did it with Baelish.
I don't want horses. I'm not trying to rush an objective. I don't even want to do anything good with it. I'm just making sure that the first thing that happens isn't my opponent plays Endless Horde. Now, I also, specifically against almost every other faction, my opening play would be, I'll take letters, please. I'll take 2 more cards. Now, when I first started playing it, I did think, maybe I'll take the risk. Maybe I'll draw Endless Horde. Right? But no, if you don't have Endless Horde in your hand right now, then don't bother with that. If you're playing Mance, and there's a very, very high opportunity chance that you are, then if you take letters, then you also effectively double the chance that he has Endless Horde in hand, because he can now just say, I'll play Long Plan then, and I'll have Endless Horde out of my deck, and then I'll play horses, and I'll have a unit, please, right? So, absolutely... If I'm Targs and I don't have Endless Horde, aka also if I'm every other faction in the game, because no other faction has I'm Targs and I don't have field control, aka I'm every faction that's not Targs. If I have first turn, first thing I do is I take horses, because I can maybe pressure and make my opponent taking horses on turn 2 at least be a tempo loss. And the only way I can do that is if I force it to be that swords is a viable option on turn 2, or that we're really close to like engaging on turn 2. Now, the whole thing flips on its head if I have field control in my first 3 cards. Now I'm going to say, I'm going to go second, please. Because if he takes horses and plays Endless Horde, I'll just field control it. And then when we come to round 2, when I don't have field control, I'm still going to take horses first, right? Because now I might not have it. It's that simple in my mind. Like, honestly, like, I know I sometimes go to like extremes of like, you know what I mean? Oh, the matchup is this simple or whatever. But for me, in my mind, it is as simple as that. Blocking Endless Horde against the Free Folk in rounds 1 and 2 will determine winning or losing the game. And there is nothing more important that you can do. I will take a swords shot. I will give up Spearwives giving a charging volley over blocking Endless Horde in the first couple of rounds of the game.
Yep. And if that happens, like, there are other things the Free Folk player can do. Obviously, you're still 40 versus 40 points. But when I speak about Free Folk, obviously one of the big things that fucks Free Folk right in the ass is a weaken token, because 4+ to hit. So actually, field control really fucks Free Folk in a double whammy, because that weaken token actually has a lot more value than it would against many other factions. So that's a big double whammy hit.
If you're not Targs though, there is a certain thing which is I can't block horses forever.
Yeah.
And I don't have field control, so I don't get to counter the card. Lannisters have maybe I want to counterplot this, and I do think that early in the game it's definite counterpart option. You could maybe swap the word field control for counterplot. Maybe. Arguable, because counterplot not guaranteed and also has so many other uses. There are really, really important, powerful cards in amongst the Free Folk deck.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is with other factions, if you very, very aggressively take horses at the start of the round, you do just create this situation where you're definitely going to have to face a 5-point unit later on in the game that died and gets respawned. But that is almost definitely better than facing raiders from an extra raider unit from turn 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Carl's true. If you're not Targs, bring Baelish. Taking horses but getting use out of something else, like
Baelish
letters, like swords,
yeah.
like whatever zone you wanted, is very, very important.
Some people talk about wildling diplomacy and like the issues that has. It has got issues, and there are things where it's like, oh, you can't block the board if they wilding diplomacy, and you've got solos, and then you can't block the board, so they might endless horde or do this, that, and the other. But it's like, at this point, you've asked them to have a pretty optimal starting hand, to which I would say, if you give anybody like one of the best opening hands that you could possibly have in the game, then yes, you'll have a problem. But like that's true of nearly like if you give Targaryens something like Blood of the Dragon, something else, and then they go, all right, so I can just like sacrifice my freed men here and activate both Bloods of the Dragon on my veterans and my flayed men. I'll take that. There are things like that in the game where it's like you give people the optimum opening hand. Yes, there is limited that you can do about it in the competitive area. But the point is that people either have that or they don't. And if they have it, then you either take the risk or you don't. People say Wildling Diplomacy is too strong a card as well. I think it's very good. I fundamentally disagree that it's the most strongest card or the strongest card in the game or anything like that. Or I actually fundamentally disagree that it needs a nerf. I do think it's a list building consideration. I do think it's something that people need to think about a lot more when list building than just building a list. That's another thing, people don't build around free folk since 1.6, when people obviously always built around free folk because they were like the second bad guys. People don't and haven't in 2021, and it's really telling. I do very much think Wildling Diplomacy doesn't need the +1 wound, maybe, but actually, like, having a card doing wounds on a situation like that is not too dissimilar to a lot of other cards in a lot of other factions, certainly from commanders. Yes, it's quite powerful. Yes, it can have problems, but it's only going to happen twice in the game, and at maximum that's 8 wounds, right? I know, but like, if we were to compare Roos with the vulnerable and panic token as a comparison, that is actually equivalent, you could roughly say, to 2 wounds for the panic and 2 wounds for the vulnerable. So actually, that's about 4 wounds. The difference is it's not straight wounds. I do agree that straight wounds is a problem for solos. But actually, in terms of damage, it's roughly equivalent. So I do think it needs changing. I do think there's changes that need to happen to Free Folk, and I do agree and sit here and say to people, yes, Mance probably does need changing. But I think that the moment you start moving into changing the Free Folk units is the moment you start massively impacting the rest of the faction. So it has to be Mance himself that gets changed.
Yeah. I do think it's an interesting discussion because obviously we're talking about, Wildling Diplomacy plus Endless Horde as an opening hand is, pretty up there in terms of like you're creating like a perfect storm. But I think that it's a very interesting choice for Mance even to choose to Wildling Diplomacy when I activate my first NCU as my first action. So presumably he picked letters and horses. He's trying to keep the horses open. I have Drawer. What's that?
You don't have to pick a zone, remember, with Wildling.
Oh, is it?
Just
It's if I take anything.
Yeah.
No, wait, he has to pick.
No, he doesn't have to pick
Remind
anything.
me what Wildling Diplomacy does?
You activate NCU if you take a zone D3 plus wins and a condition token.
Okay. I do think that's very powerful.
It is. I'm not going to sit here and say to people it's not powerful. Because I say it definitely makes solos have a discussion. And I do think if you remove the D3 plus 1, then the only thing in the game really that it threatens, and I do mean the only thing in the game, is Jorah at 3 wins. Like, if you take away the plus 1 wound, it doesn't threaten dogs, it doesn't threaten mountain that rides, and everything else that's in the game has more than 4 wounds. So.
Anyway, how did we end up chatting about Free Folk again, as always, for half an hour?
Because they're at the top.
But they at the top.
That's how it works.
Yeah, fuck Mance.
Yeah, fuck Mance.
Mance has the author problem, right? Mance has the author problem, which is that in every possible category we can look at, he's the best possible choice for Free Folk. He's got practically the best attachment abilities you could have, right? Rally point, so important for the Free Folk, and particularly Raiders with their extra wounds taken.
Yeah.
His cards are 3 of the best cards in the whole game, right? And he has 3 of them. Like, it's not just like 2 are good and 1's kind of trash. Like, all 3 are brilliant cards. All 3 you'd almost never not want to see in your hand. Except, like, there is a small aspect of like early versus late certain turns, but like they're all just power piece cards.
Mm-hmm.
And then throw in that his counter strategy is just fucking good on top of all of that. The thing is that I can see him getting authored and being nerfed in so many possible ways that we're talking about, you need to change this card, you need to change this card, you need to do this, you need to change his rally point. Nobody has even said, you need to change counter strategy.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also one of the most important key parts of what makes him powerful. There are a million ways that he could be toned down, but what makes him so stand out is that he is powerful in every one of those cases. Every one of those things combined is good. Each one of those things in isolation would make him good, and he has all of it at the same time. So I think that is kind of the thing. We can look at somebody like Asher. She also has rally point. She is also in a terrible morale faction. But Asher's not dominant because she doesn't also bring those other combos, those other things. She's not by far the best choice.
No.
So what he just needs to do is he needs to move into line with the other options, be equally good with what other options are available to the Free Folk, so that Free Folk become a much more interesting faction and not so one-dimensional. Don't nerf him because you hate playing against him. Nerf him because you hate him being the only thing that you ever see or only ever thing that you get to play as when you want to play Free Folk competitively.
The problem is, like, I've got no problem with him being the control commander, and people hate control, right? That's actually the big thing. People hate control. Tyrion, for example, is still probably one of the better Lannister commanders, and he's a control commander in a control faction. Control has always kind of universally been powerful, and now we can argue what control is, but it has always been a powerful thing. And Mance gives you the ability to control the game, and that's powerful. But yeah, I think you do need to change Mance. Mance definitely needs to see changes. But I think if you fundamentally change Mance in too many ways, you will actually inadvertently completely fuck over Free Folk, because for a long period of time, he was the only reason they were even in the discussion. Sad tear.
And not many people will shed a tear.
No, not many people.
Just like not many people shed a tear when Offal got fucked.
No. It's a thing. Baratheons are still shit. That's actually the interesting thing. Baratheons are still not very good.
There's still one more tournament. There's still the Cheltenham Bunker that we haven't talked about.
Won by Double Jon Snow, who was the other man who saw he saw jaw change, and he saw for the watch change, and of course conscripts. The conscript change being obviously the big thing. I think me and Carlo talked a bit about before the episode started today. It's the conscript change in Night's Watch that's probably the most impactful, because it simply means you're now points short in the list. But yeah, Jon Snow type lists, and yeah, they did well. I don't know which lists he used in each one. I'd have to go and look them up, but he did well. He won all of his games, and yeah, it was an overall good time. 3 Free Folk players came in at the kind of like 4, 5, and 6 category. Category, including someone who picked up 2 losses but running a double mag list. Man's insane. I think they are mag, giant, 1-1, 2 NCUs, and mag, 1-1, giant, raiders, 2 NCUs.
Okay.
Jesus.
Good on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Chelmsford lot have seemed to have got together a really good, close-knit community. There are some players from outside of the really local community going.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, running Free Folk, double Mance, was going into the event world's #1 player.
Mm-hmm.
He lost to Dan, who is a great player that I've played before, and a long-time John player, long-time Night's Watch player, not kind of jumping on the bandwagon kind of player. But loses the last game 11-12, but a point away from it being 4 out of 5 wins for Free Folk over the weekend for the tournaments. But Dan does it, takes it away, and really crushed Jacob's ranking in the process. It's always hard being at the top. You're always a single loss away from being right back down in 3rd, 4th, or 5th. But yeah, really well done to Dan for taking on Jacob, getting the win there in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Night's Watch still showing that they can be strong. John is still a very powerful commander. We are seeing a lot of Ranger Hunters as we expected. And John, generally speaking, is the staple, the go-to that we see for Night's Watch. And that's not surprising when you think about his popularity on top of his current strength.
Yes.
Right. Even when he wasn't anywhere near as dominant as Othel could be, he still saw a lot of play. and now that offal is far more manageable and far more reasonable, John has become standout the most common thing that we will see from Night's Watch, I think, for quite a while.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there's definitely discussions to be had about John as well, I think. I don't necessarily think he's OP. What's actually interesting is that people go OP, and I am on the opinion at the moment that I don't actually think that there's anything OP that we've seen yet. When we talk about OP, right, this is a thing that people need to really realize, and I think the use of the terminology needs to be much more careful from some individuals. What we're talking about is something that is so good that it becomes ubiquitous. Offal was OP, if you want to use that term, because it was obvious how you build an offal list. It was obvious how he worked. It was obvious how he functions. The list built itself. You could actually sit back, kind of put offal in a list, and you'd be like, well, this is obviously good. This is obviously good. This is obviously good. Then you're changing maybe 4 or 5 points on top. Mother of Dragons was obviously a problem for the game because it was 21 points built for you, and after that point, there's not really much you can do. It had a problem. It's ubiquitous. Do I think Mance lists are OP? Jury's still out a little bit as a consideration, but I do think. I mean, you've only got to look at Larks and what Larks is running in comparison to other players, right? Larks runs double trappers, Tormund Raiders, a giant, and 2 chariots. It's not exactly the same list at all. It's still hitting 9 activations. Is that a problem for Free Folk? Maybe. Is there individual components of Free Folk that are problematic? Probably. But I think using the term OP, which I've seen so many people use, is like, this is good, therefore it's OP.
That's interesting. Wannes says OP equals obvious problem.
Yeah.
I've never ever considered OP to mean obvious problem.
Obviously, people say overpowered.
Means to me, in my mind, instantly what comes to is overpowered.
But if you use it as
and they mean incredibly different things.
Yes, they do.
So that's why, and I also just hate when people talk about OP because everything's just a grayscale. Like everything's just on a grayscale of like powerful to not.
Yeah.
And there's no magic line. Once you step over, you're suddenly overpowered. If something is overpowered, then the magic line was so far back that you can't see it anymore. Right? Like,
yeah, that's actually
something to be actually overpowered. Balance has to be like over there. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if not, then there are always counters and there are always things. It's when you have no counters, right? Like, actually, things that we can talk about being OP, powered, damaging the game. Things that there are no good counters to in the whole game. And I would say, personally, that Offal, Night's Watch was in that category.
Yeah.
And 10 activation Starks in 1.6 were in that category. Right? If I tell you I'm playing, let's put it this way. If you tell me you're playing Offal Night's Watch and you say to me, you can build anything you want to try and beat me, you know exactly what my list is. Try and craft a list to beat me. If what I decide is the best thing to beat you is also Offal Night's Watch, then you're overpowered, right? If you don't have a counter that I can build knowing that I think that you're going to face into that, then it's a problem. If in 1.6 you tell me, I'm playing Starks, build what you think is the perfect counter. The problem is that the perfect counter is I'm going to also bring Starks. I'm also going to bring, Walder, Starks, Dogs, until we have the same activations and all this kind of stuff. if at least the counter to Awful Night's Watch is, okay, I'm going to bring Khal Drogo Expert Duelist. And Khal Drogo has a different counter. Khal Drogo is, all right, well, I'm going to bring Stark Hardened Spam, or I'm going to bring, something else, right? Like, if we can at least create a wheel of all 5 of these lists are powerful, and like each one has good matchups against 3 of them and bad matchups against 2, or at least one of them is a bad matchup for any of them, and it's not itself. Its bad matchup can't be itself. If you are in that category by yourself, where your bad matchup is you, and everything else is a good matchup, then we're into the problematic state. And that is the only things that I will ever accept the words OP around. Everything else is not overpowered. What it has is it has positive matchups against most stuff. And there are some matchups which are not good, and understanding what they are, learning to play around them, means that you will have to adapt your list, and you'll probably become worse against the stuff that you're good against in trying to become good against the stuff that you're bad against. And that's where I think that balance becomes really interesting and becomes exciting and a thing to study. If the best thing to field against the best thing in the game is more of itself, then the game is stale and boring. And Peter says, what's the counter to Mance right now? I don't know, but what I would say is I'd probably be most interested at looking at low activation count. Very strong units.
Drogo. Drogo in obviously Targaryens bringing field control is obviously a very useful thing. I think Targaryens has got to be where you look initially, because they have natural counters built into the deck. So that's just something you don't have to worry as much about. And you look at something like Drogo, because Drogo.
Yeah, I do also agree that John Ranger Hunter bouncing lots of attacks also has a great place.
Yeah.
John is probably John Ranger Hunters. They're probably their perfect counter to
Spam
to just
lists.
Like deleting raiders in one charge and bounce.
Yeah.
Whereas then John has a problem, as we've discussed, with Teemu, and I actually think that he really does have a problem. John has a problem with hardened spam, right? Which says either Greyjoy Baelor could be a problem, could be talking Starks could be a problem, right? And things get super interesting once we talk about a 2-list pairing. If we can create a 2-list pairing which doesn't have any weaknesses, then that's a whole nother level of complexity. At least if that 2-list pairing isn't the same commander twice. And yeah, I do think that maybe there's a chance that Lance Cavalry can have a place, but I don't know. I'm a bit, once you're highly activated, you might as well just have an activation which you can just go out there and hit them with, because you can't delay. So like you might as well just have cavalry maneuvers and go at it.
What I'll straight away say to people: high aggression. Anything that is going out there to kill your opponent, Free Folk will struggle with, because they don't have much sustain. Like they don't have good base stats, and it's horrible. But don't try and play the control matchup into them, because they have more units, they can do things, they have lots of other control methods. If you make the game, and it's not Carlo's style, for example, but if you make the game dicey and go, I'm going to come in and just go, I'm going to go really good dice at you, then eventually the averages will even out and your stats will just win through. Like, that's what beats Free Folk. You've got better stats. Use your fucking stats. That's the only, like, the other aspects of the game. Oh, but I can try and outmaneuver them. No, you can't. I've got more units. I have more maneuverability. I have an NCU that is one of the most powerful NCUs in the game. Like, don't try and outmaneuver me. Just kill me. And it sounds really stupid, but like, I'm really worried about Great John and BBGs, because they'll kill themselves coming into me. But there's actually a decent chance they'll just kill a unit and overrun and do a lot of damage, if not kill the second unit. They can do that reliably from 14 inches away, and that's scary.
I disagree that Free Folk have too many wounds.
Yeah.
In the new game that goes on for longer. I think that if we were in this state without the longer gameplay because Mance could still score 2 points a turn.
That would be really
And
problematic.
that the game would end very fast, and Insignificant has a huge role to play when objectives are by far the majority of scoring the game. I think that the longer game is a nerve to free folk because the activations will begin to parity out the more time you can spend fighting them. On the flip side of that, Mance is now liberated to just like be the center point of your army. He doesn't have to sit in a corner, so he can be a bit annoying because his morale bubble has now become way more mobile. He's not confined to controlling a point. But this is turning into an absolute free folk chat as always, which I hate.
No, but like people ask questions, right? So anyway, those are the kind of things that work, and it's all that the all-out aggression style stuff does actually help because it's just relentless, relentless. And yeah, there are other things that I think are good. Things that perhaps don't see much play or don't see much light of day, and strategies and things. One thing I will say, and I don't know if it's just me, Carlo. Have you seen an absolutely like dearth of range units? They've just all disappeared. People are running like hybrid units a lot more. We're still seeing like Lightbringers because people in Baratheon still think Lightbringers are pretty good. But like dedicated range units don't seem to be existing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that that's a big, big thing that people seem to have just walked away from. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do agree that I think that
that's not against free folk, just in the game. But
I think that nobody has bothered to explore ranged units because they just can't. They couldn't win against Arthur crossbows, right? Like, what's the point in trying when you're definitely the second and third rate version of what Night's Watch do? But I think that there is space there to be explored. But don't forget, cavalry got significantly improved. Lance is way better. Light cavalry all practically lost a point. That is very, very, very dangerous for archers.
it is. It is. All right then. Should we go on to the last part of today?
Absolutely.
Because you may have already.
I think I already saw it pop up ever so quickly.
These are pictures you're going to rate 0. There's quite a few of them. I'm going to be honest for a little while. Let's zoom in, get a good, nice view of these guys as we go through. This is an entire Night's Watch army I was sent last night, painted up to a decent standard.
I like that Dario is in his Night's Watch garb.
Slightly green though, still. He's not full. He's not the full dark. He's got a bit of green in him still. Trying to keep that color. Yeah, good so far.
I think that's. I love those bases. I love a good base. And send your builders all over the shop.
We'll keep going through.
That's some really nice OLS or whatever.
OSL.
OSL.
Jesus. This one here.
Nice.
Here's a question.
Controversial as always. Don't like that Baelish isn't on the same base as everybody else.
Yeah.
That has just lost you 10 points, putting you on a 0 out of
10. Was he really collecting 10 points before? Jesus. You heard it here first.
This also might be I don't know if this is controversial, actually. I hate that Watch Captain sculpt.
Because it just looks silly?
Yeah, he looks like a prat.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's actually that controversial. I'm probably in agreement. Here you go, here's some conscripts.
This is really absolutely an army that I really, really hope to play against one day.
We'll have a look at these two. The new Cold Hands and one of the newer veterans, right? No, it's Gren.
Yeah, it's Gren.
We'll keep going. The new Cold Hands on Elk.
elk cold hands. Everybody's doing him with like blue glowy eyes, and I think that looks great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Vanguards.
Vanguards, very nice.
We've got Ranger Hunters. Solid work. A good proportion of the that's the starter box, I believe, painted up and provided on table.
Yeah, that's the whole starter box.
Whole starter. This was before that snow was added to the base, clearly. A nice close up of John.
Eyes and everything.
Yeah.
Eyes that don't look googly.
Googly eyes. A close up of jaw. Are you enjoying this? Are you enjoying this?
Yeah, like I'm really, really impressed. Like this is all I ever want from an army. Right? Like this is like I couldn't possibly want the army to be better painted. Like yes, there are people who can paint some individual models to exceptional mind-boggling levels of standard. But this is far and beyond what I would hope to see on the table opposite me. And like and I think that the bases just tie it all together, make them look so good, consistent color scheme, consistent color palette, finished army, neat, great bases, great color contrast. Oh, so 0 out of 10.
If only Baelish was on a similarly coloured.
Yeah, Baelish. Goddamn Baelish, you could have had 10 out of 10.
Yeah. There we go.
Crossbows. Nah. No cross. No.
No, not anymore. These were sent to me by patron Kevin McReynolds with this army. Shall I tell you the next bit? Because the next bit might make you go, oh, that makes a lot more sense. My initial response of oof was oof. Nice work, buddy. I might just go through the lot and see how Carlo feels. And then he had to send me a message following up saying, sorry I didn't get to them sooner, but I will say this. I own them, but I didn't paint them.
Are they... You know what? I've got no problems with that.
It's fine.
I'm not going to lie. I mean, whoever painted them, right?
There's two people. Can you believe it? These were all painted by two individuals. And you know one of them.
Well, I think that they look professionally painted. Are they Ye-Cats?
They are indeed Ye-Cats. Grant Stacey is the man responsible for the whole starter box. He painted up the original starter box. Where I can find the picture. There we go. Ye-Cats painted the original starter box miniatures. That was Grant Stacey's work. And the crossbowmen and the snow to the bases was actually added afterwards by one of Kevin's close friends who also plays the game, who basically put the snow on and did the crossbowmen up to the same standard as Grant Stacey. So between Grant Stacey and this other guy who I don't have the name of, actually genuinely really nice. I
mean, I was literally going to say, like, you know, if this was somebody's personal army, then, you know, it is of professional standard. Yeah. Like, it's beautiful army. You know, I'd be so happy to own it.
So that's Kevin Reynolds, but obviously shout out to Grant and the work that he does over at Ye-Cats, because he's a great painter. You know, hopefully that won't be the last one we see for a while. We've got some more. Actually, I'll show you this other one, Carlo, because I think you're going to rate this one quite highly. And I know this one's been quite an important one.
Is he going to have loads of... Oh, it's got... Yes! Extra rock. Yes. Lovely.
If anyone hasn't seen this, is Elite Teddy's finished new Jamie sculpt, which Carlo has been absolutely railing on over the last couple of days over on the UK GT Discord.
I wasn't... Just to be clear, right? Like, I wasn't specifically calling out Elite Teddy when I said I don't like miniatures with lots of extra rocks. But he does love an extra rock. Actually, I'll tell you, the worst offenders that I've ever seen are like dire wolves that I've seen where they're on like, honestly, it's beautiful work. It's beautiful scenic cinematic work, but it's like this big. And I'm like, I don't like it. I just don't like all that work's gone to waste because the direwolf is this high up off the table, and it just doesn't. It looks great as a display piece, but it's not a playable piece. Yes, it is technically playable, but not for me. Not for me.
Yeah.
I like Drogon. Not so much Jaime. I actually don't like the Jaime sculpt. I don't like the modern Jaime sculpt. His sword arm looks a bit weird, and I don't like individual models being given loads of extra height in that way. I believe half of that is like Jaime already comes on a rock, right? And then he's elevated that even higher with more rocks. Which, you know, we all know that I'm not a great fan of any kind of extra elevation.
It's young Griff. Also, for anyone that doesn't know, obviously some people might be newer here. I'm shorter than Carlo. There's a reason that Carlo doesn't like extra elevation. I'm just gonna leave that one out there. He doesn't like being the shortest guy in the room, and when someone lifts me up, Carlo feels inferior. Anyway,
there was one final. What was I going to add? There was one final thing. Oh yeah, there's one miniature in my whole army who I elevated, put him higher up. Can you guess who it is?
Which army? You're gonna have to give me more. Targaryen, Lannisters.
It's in my Baratheons.
Baratheons. Your Baratheon miniature that you made higher up. Does it classify? Does it classify if you put them on the horse?
No.
Right. Okay.
I elevated Tiny Loras so that he doesn't look so tiny anymore.
Yeah.
So he actually comes to the same height as everybody else.
What you need to do is just buy yourself a new Lannister hero box. Baratheon hero box. I've heard they fixed that problem.
Not going to potluck it, unfortunately.
No. Anyway.
Right. 3 hours. We had nothing to talk about, and yet we managed to talk for 3 hours, as always.
And there's a good amount of free folk talk in there. So, Dan, if you're listening on repeat or catch up on the podcast, we've done it for you, Dan. That's who we have all these free folk chats for, because we know you love them. All right then, guys. We will be back next week, same time, same place, as far as I'm aware. We might have some more things to discuss. We might not. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Check out the Patreon if you haven't already. Check out Carlo's OnlyFans, because he likes posting pictures of very angry people and pictures that say, he actually takes pictures of signs that say no rocks allowed. He's like that kind of guy. And yeah, I hope that events in your local areas go really well. On that note, let's have a quick run through of the events happening this weekend. We have Noobski Tourney, which is probably a tournament for newer players in Wrocław, Poland. And we also have a Polish league starting up. That's happening this weekend. We have XX, which I'm guessing is just a
almost
test
definitely
event.
A placeholder event, which will get deleted.
We have Torneo Valencia Marzo in Valencia, Spain. We have another Lublin event happening in Poland. We have the Long Night ending. The Long Night is now over in Hammerhead Games in Sacramento, California. We have House of Orcs, the second one of House of Orcs series. I will be checking that one out definitely, because House of Orcs looked great the last time they had an event. That's happening in Viterbo, Italy. And we also have another Polish event happening in Poland on Sunday. And that is it, taking us through to Sunday. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, don't count you, 6, 7 events starting this week. One of them running for a long time.
Great, really great rate.
6 events should have an ender. Go on.
There is one more event coming up. I forget. It's soon, right? I think it's in 2 weekends' time, which is the Spanish event. El Rey and Lenort.
Yes.
You just had it there. Yeah. This is shaping up to be a pretty big event. Mm-hmm. And the winner will come away with an invitational spot at the LGT. So I know that they already have international travelers coming from France and Belgium. So you know, if you're not already set for that weekend and you can make it down to Santander, then this is going to be one of the biggest European events that we've seen, this year so far. In the past, basically since Always Winter, this is looking like a pretty big event, and hopefully it's going to go really, really well. They have in the past, of course, ran their Clash of Regions, which was a huge undertaking, which took a very, very long time because of all COVID problems. But I wish them all the best of luck with this. I'm sure we'll check in with it after it's done. But yeah, really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. One of the biggest events, the first really big numbers event that I think that we will see in the new balance patch.
Yep. Also, obviously, again, shout out to, it's on the screen anyway, to Scabman and the guys down at Imjin Barracks doing their 24-hour charity event, which is happening on the same weekend.
Absolutely.
Check that out. Look at the pictures for both of those events on the homepage, as nicely demonstrated by mine.
There's a charity raffle. Go buy some tickets. What you have a chance of winning is amazing value. Loads of people put stuff in. There's even an LGT ticket in there, amongst loads of other prizes that people have donated. So yeah, just honestly go and give what you can.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening this week, guys. It's been great to be here again. I hope to get some more games in this week. Maybe we'll see. See if Friday happens. And I hope that everyone has a great week. That you get some painting of your miniatures done, and that everyone gets a nice chill out. And yeah, we'll take it easy, guys. We'll catch you next time.
See you later.
Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?